This is the March 25th joint meeting. Actually, it's a work session between the Select Board and the Budget Finance Committee. And we thank you all for being here. Since it is a work session, we would ask that there be no public comment tonight unless you are asked a question from the member of one of these boards. What we're trying to do is reach a budget compromise, and not necessarily a compromise, but a budget agreement. So with that in mind, and for the members of the boards, I ask you please stay on point when you're discussing parts of this, and in the interest of time. I am glad to say that Joe Bruno has agreed to head the meeting up now, because he has the budget experience that I kind of lack, this sort of a budget. So thank you, Joe, very much. And
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
yes,
This, as advertised, is a Budget Finance Committee meeting,
yes.
and I believe Chairman Olson should be running the meeting, not Chairman Gifford.
Well, what is the thought on that, Chairman Olson?
That's the schedule.
The schedule called for this to be originally to be the meeting to vote the articles coming down to us from the Select Board. As those weren't, normally, in normal circumstance, what would have happened is this meeting would have been canceled, but I was asked whether we could continue to meet so they could present other alternatives that they had, which I agreed to.
Then why don't you chair it? You are the chairman of the Budget Finance Committee.
Because where they're presenting this to us, I asked the select chair to head the meeting.
Now, was there any other correspondence on that between us?
No.
Did we? No?
No, it was a decision from the chair to the chair.
I'm also asking, point of order, Mr. Chairman Olson, if you were not here tonight, who's the co-chair of the Budget Finance Committee?
There's not an official co-chair.
Exactly. So if there's no co-chair and you're not here, you know, is this the form of government we want? And I don't know how the other people feel on this board, but when we elected a chair, at that same meeting, we should have elected a co-chair, just in case something happens. Not trying to be negative about this, but this meeting was advertised as a Budget Finance Committee meeting, not a Select Board meeting. The Select Board chose to not call it a meeting, they're calling it a workshop, because they don't have to advertise that way. I believe it's not fair to the public. The public was expecting a budget finance meeting, not a select board meeting, run by not the co-chair of the select board, but somebody handpicked that supposedly knows the budget better. And I don't want to hear any comments.
I think I can.
Yeah.
Rolf contacted, if I may speak, Rolf contacted me about the format of the meeting. Given that we weren't in the position that we would normally be at this time, it made sense to structure it in this way. So he contacted me and we set it up, and I see absolutely no issue, no problem, structural or otherwise, with the setup. It's a budget workshop. If we're ever going to get to a budget, we're going to have to work together to do that. That's the purpose of this meeting. I don't know as it really matters a whole bunch who chairs the meeting, but Rolf asked that it be chaired by the Board
I'm
of
sorry,
Selectmen.
but I've got the floor.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
I
You
was
didn't-
talking, you interrupted.
Guys, come on.
No, you don't.
Let's,
Yeah, I do. I made the point of order, and if he wants to talk, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but he can wait his turn. This meeting should be run by Rolf Olson. I'm sorry.
oh, could I ask, since there's only one parliamentarian in the room?
Yeah, and he's now the chairman of the
Well,
board.
He's not.
No, he's not.
I would ask, and the town clerk is here. My concern is, and it's just been raised, is the issue of notice. Are we all right with the issue of notice, the way this meeting was noticed? I think, Mr. Desjardins, is that your point? Is
Yeah.
that there is a legal issue about notice of the meeting. I don't think we wanna get into who and what and the correspondence, because there's a lot of emails that go back and forth that, I'll tell you honestly, I'm not even in the loop on, so I can't speak to those. What I can ask is, number one, from a legal standpoint, is this a legally noticed meeting? I wanna get on with this meeting tonight, just to be clear, but if it's not a legally noticed meeting, I think we all have to step back for just a minute and regroup. So, could I ask?
Was it on the website?
On the calendar, yes.
As a budget finance
No,
meeting.
as a budget finance and board of selectmen.
No, it wasn't. Not on the not on the schedule. I'm sorry to disagree with you.
That's what was on the website.
We'll check the website.
Okay.
I think one of the key things is that the meeting that was originally in this date and time is not the meeting we're having. So let's not confuse the fact that we're having a meeting tonight. It's not the same meeting that was originally scheduled. Because if it had been just the budget finance thing, Dana, we wouldn't be having this meeting because we haven't gotten the Board of the Select Board's decisions yet.
That's
So-
fine. So we should have canceled, Brian.
Well, but instead, and I think it goes back to, the point you made in our first meeting of having more additional meetings so that we can get further additional information. I saw this as a place where we could kind of come together and have further discussions that would ultimately get us to a budget and really work through things. And we have three, I think, very solid options in front of us to discuss. And so I think the thing that, my point would be is that the meeting that was originally positioned for this time is not the meeting we're having. So we shouldn't confuse those.
And I agree with your point, I just wanna ask about the legality.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
fair.
I mean, now that the question's been raised, do we have a legal basis to hold a meeting? We need a decision on that, based on notice.
Steve?
Was it advertised, Mike? Was it on the website?
On the public calendar, it's Budget Finance Committee meeting, 7 PM.
Yep.
So why don't we make a motion to cancel the table the meeting, and any volunteers that wanna stay here and help this town progress for our budget, they can stay, and anybody else doesn't wanna stay, they can
Well,
go.
you did advertise the meeting. It's just
This-
a budget finance meeting.
Okay, well, I'll
So-
make a motion that we table,
No,
because
yeah.
we don't have a budget,
We can still have the
You
meeting.
can
and
still
then
have
we
a
can,
meeting.
then we can have a workshop, and
You can still
hopefully
have a meeting.
keep this town on the right track.
The chair of the budget finance committee can appoint a pro tem at any time.
Right, we've done
So,
that.
so the chair has appointed Mr. Gifford as the pro tem.
Without the rest of the board knowing about it.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does.
No, it
This
doesn't.
is a democracy, Joe. This is
Listen,
not.
when you
you
know
know-
the rules of parliamentary procedure, then you can talk to me.
You know
But the-
what?
But the chair
I
can.
quit bowing to the King of England and,
Well,
you know.
if you're gonna
Robert's
make
Rules of
asinine
Order-
statements, make them. But the chair has the right to appoint a pro tem at any time.
But nobody
He doesn't
knew
have
about
to
it.
consult anyone. That's why he's the chair.
Nobody knew about it.
So,
I received an email saying he was gonna run the meeting.
Mr. Crockett, you haven't been here for the past 2 meetings. So what, you know?
I received that same email.
I didn't.
I did not.
I did.
I didn't
There's a
receive
lack of communication in this town.
So is it just
And-
the
and
budget
the
finance
folks in
got
the
the email?
audience,
I got
You
it
know?
right here on my phone.
Budget finance, I didn't get it.
we're not hearing about it, so.
I guess the point I think we're at is that it's a budget finance committee meeting. That's all, so we're working under and operating under a delegated authority, but it would be under the rules of the budget finance committee with an appointed and a redelegated chair.
Right.
Because Rolf gave it to Sam and Sam gave it to you, but we're operating under.
I didn't redelegate.
I am not
Chair.
chairing, he's just asking me to run the budget portion.
That's right.
But he can't because it's
No,
Rolf,
yes,
it's
he
Rolf's
can.
meeting,
No, he appointed a pro tem.
but it's Rolf's meeting.
No, he
Wow.
appointed, the chair appointed a pro tem.
That's what I'm saying, it went from Rolf to Sam to you.
I'm not chairing the meeting, I'm just running the budget discussion.
Oh, okay.
That's not
work?
sharing.
Okay.
What would work for you, Charlie? What if,
Well, it's not me, this is a, I think what I'm hearing is, in order to make this a legal meeting, we need to establish that it's a Budget and Finance Committee meeting, because that's the way it was advertised.
Why don't we
And it's
take-
not a workshop, it's a meeting, because there are different rules on how you run a workshop. As you suggested, Mr. Gifford, in this case, at a workshop, you can tell the public they can't speak until the very end. There's some rules and procedures for workshops. This wasn't advertised as a workshop, it's been advertised as a Budget and Finance Committee meeting, so they would go through their procedures of opening the meeting, delegating the authority, and moving on with if there's any correspondence, minutes, that, and then we get into the discussion, because it's a regular meeting of the Budget Finance Committee, as advertised, and then it's a legal meeting. I don't see why there's any,
If that is the case, why don't we do just that, just to get moving here?
that's what I would suggest.
Ralph, you are the chair of this meeting.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. The first order of business is the presentation of ideas on the budget. At this point, I turn this over to the select board, to Sam Gifford, to handle the presentation of the various ideas.
And in turn, I turn it over to Joe Bruno.
Wow.
So now that we've got through those shenanigans,
Well,
let's,
excuse me.
Yep.
Come on, Joe, no inflammatory language.
not inflammatory.
It's procedural, that's what was just done, it's just simple procedure to keep the meeting legal, please, and civil, so we can get out of here. Civil?
We'll give one time for you.
okay,
Yeah,
all
well,
right.
Thank you, Sam, I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
let's get on with the meeting. You are all given 3 new options on this budget. There were 3 alternatives presented by Don that came out of ideas presented to him. Mr. Levitt had one idea, which I believe is alternative 3, if I remember correctly. So, the big question here is, how are we gonna address this budget? We know we have $900,000 in revenue coming in from the sale of an easement on a cell tower up on Patricia Avenue. The question is, how are we gonna use those proceeds to keep the tax rate down? And what are we gonna do with that money? You could come up with a bonding proposal, as Mr. Levitt suggested earlier. You could take that excess revenue and spend it in different ways and actually try to keep the mill rate down by using that excess revenue and maybe even putting some of that away. There's some cuts that can be made to the budget. I will open it up to the floor to find out what people's ideas are on how they want to proceed with this budget. Mike?
For folks, if you bear with me just a moment. We've gone 6 years presenting to our town a budget that has been tax neutral to our citizens. I think some people sitting here on these tables have only reviewed budgets that have been tax neutral as presented by the town manager and the staff. It's possible that some of the decline in our town meetings is because there hasn't been a lot of excitement out there from the citizens to come to a town meeting to discuss a effectively revenue neutral budget. So I'm not afraid to take some of these items to the town and to the townspeople and let them have a conversation about it at a town meeting standpoint. They have the ability to refuse an amount. They have the ability to propose a new amount. So it's possible that through a process that for some items, and the way I thought of this is some of our committees have asked for money in addition to the monies they received last year. I'll call out the library and Raymond Waterways. Now, those are items I think that our citizenry can really wrap their hands around and decide whether or not that is a public use, a public good. You know, do you wanna spend more of your tax dollars on milfoil and the water, or on libraries and the programming for what comes from the library? And I think those are fairly easy to give to the citizens and say, hey, what do you think? There are other budget items that are pretty complex, like the fire department. I mean, to ask the public to debate the fire department budget in detail and understand that is probably a little different than asking them to debate the library or waterways or, you know, the rec department. So as I go through this budget, I'm gonna try to keep that in mind, as to how I feel about a budget item or a line item, on my recommendations. So I appreciate your letting me speak, Joe.
I guess I mean, following where Mike's going there, the question I would have is typically the way that the warrant articles are written would allow a lowering of figures but not an increasing of figures. If that is the case, do you have that dialogue? Does that dialogue exist? And in my opinion, it would not at that point, because the figures can move only one way, so it's not a true dialogue. So if that's the case, are you going to would you change how you would do your warrant articles to allow for that give and take?
You mean have an open warrant article?
Well, yeah, because, if Mike's saying, we want to have an open dialogue, and if the select board comes in and says, okay, our recommendation is $3,000, the town wants $4,000 for it, they have no mechanism to do it under the way that the typical warrant article would be written. So if that is being contemplated, then I think you have to look at how you're gonna write your warrant articles so that is allowed.
Well, I think the reason we have closed warrant articles is just for the fear that someone can come in and say, I want to increase this warrant article $10,000,
I mean, it may be a valid fear, but but the fact is, we're sitting here, we're saying that, we wanna have the input from the people, but their input can only go one way, down.
you can have input.
It can be here or it can be lower, it can't, so you don't have that true input.
Well, the input should be done at the hearings for the meetings, such as tonight or ensuing meetings when we're gonna be voting on warrant articles. That's when you ought to have the input. But,
Well, but again, if they give that input and then the select board says, okay, for example, we only think $3,000 is what's allowed, but the populace thinks that more should be allowed. They've given their input there, it was not listened to or whatever, for one reason or another. And now, you're still saying you want their input, but they don't have the ability to give that input.
well, like I said, now is the time to have the input. And as elected officials, you make the tough decisions. That's why you get paid all this money that we get paid, to make those tough decisions. So,
Joe, if I might, to clarify, Ralph, I guess I was speaking more at the level of the requested funds. It's easier for me, for instance, on those items that I think the public has a better understanding for, to throw the requested number out there that was requested by the organization, as opposed to us saying, well, I don't think they should get the requested. I guess that was more what I was thinking, just based on what I've heard around the room. And that's my position on some of those funds. And then it can come down to, if it comes down to the fact that it was at the level that it was last year, and the requested increase is not granted by the town. I guess I was more comfortable with that approach as opposed to an open-ended, but I hadn't thought of it as an open-ended, so. Thank you, Joe.
I mean, when you sit here and you look at the budget as presented, it's a 20-cent increase on the mill rate as calculated by our assessor. Last year we had, I think, a 90-cent increase on the 70, 1040 to 1110, right? So, and most of it was due to the school. So we have such a minuscule impact on the entire mill rate. And, but, I mean, it's still, we need to do our part, and hopefully the school committee will do their part this year, and try and arrive at a budget that people can afford. I think that's the big thing. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is whether or not to bond for roads this year. And I am of the, after really doing a lot of thinking and analysis on this thing, I think we need to wait until we do away with the 2 bond payments for next year, and that 2014 is probably the better time to go out with a road bond. But then again, I think it might be a good time from the Road Improvement Committee. You know, we heard that if you give me $500,000 in road improvement, I can do a lot with that. And I think it might not be a bad idea to use some of that proceeds from the sale of the cell tower money towards giving the road construction a longer season. Because even if we go out to bond after town meeting, it's not gonna, you know, even go out until September, or October, which already brings you into the 2014 year. So I don't see the hurry to do that, but I think if we give them a big chunk of cash now, in June, the planning process can begin and a lot of work can get done over the next 6 months. Brian?
Joe, I agree with the, one of the concerns I had coming in was I think, given what I heard from the Road Improvement Committee, is that we don't want to delay beginning the work, because the longer you wait, the more expensive it is to do the work that's needed. So your idea is a good one. When you started, I thought, I'm a little concerned about that, because I don't want to delay that process. But if there's a way to use some of the monies to begin that process now, and then the bonding would come in at the later point, I think that's a good idea.
If you remember, the budget presented has $275,000 for road work now.
Right.
I think if you take $225,000 more out of the sale of the tower and give them $500,000 to do road work, I think that gets a lot
Well, then
done.
275 is for maintenance, right? I mean, that was kind of
Right.
ongoing maintenance,
Right.
but obviously they can be used however. Right.
Yeah, I guess I wanna fall back on, without putting the road improvement committee report on the shelf so soon, is, the history of the chairman of that board is, he's not a bond guy. He's not a guy who's come to this, community over the past 15 years and said, I'm a big advocate of bonds. He's been a fellow who stood up the other night at a meeting when he presented and said the reason why he was in favor of it and the reason why we should be considering it are the extremely low rates. And I've heard that through the Cumberland County Civic Center renovation. That's been the driving force behind why bonds now. And when I heard Ralph Olson say, well, I'm not a bond guy, but I think it's now time to bond, that's what got the thinking going, when we included not only the roads, but the needs of the fire and public safety and the needs of public works that came forward in what was a probably better and detailed CIP, which you had requested, Joe. You had wanted that more detailed CIP, and we had a chance to look at that. We know there's historic rates, we know there's 900,000 coming in, and to quote a citizen who stood at the podium, he's not confident, and I know it's been proffered as that's a negative statement, but he's not confident that this town will actually spend the money on the roads. And when you put that money for CIP, Public Works, CIP, fire, and into the roads, it has to be spent in those areas. There's no, let's kick the can down the road philosophy, which we've done over the past. That's why we're where we're at. We've fallen down on the roads for so long. We have this opportunity, this income stream, that you bond this, you take advantage of the historically low rates. In fiscal year 2015-16, it becomes revenue neutral because of those retiring 3 bonds, plus another retiring 2 bonds later after that. So I'm just saying this is a radical departure from the thinking that we've had, which actually the underpinnings of my proposal came from trying to take the best information that I was receiving from individuals like yourself, Joe, and from Rolf, and trying to say, Because to be honest with you, I think you heard me at the road improvement, at your presentation, I wasn't in favor of the bonds. I'm still very skeptical about giving any bank at this time the banks that created part of this fiscal crisis we're in, giving them more money. And if you commit that 900,000 and you take the accumulated 4-year CIP for public works and public safety and you include the 2 million, we'll be revenue neutral on this thing in 2015-16. And appreciably put ourselves in a position to lower our maintenance and ongoing operating costs in this town for the next 3 to 4 years.
The thing that has me change my position a little about bonding this year is that the Federal Reserve came out with a report saying they don't see interest rates moving much for the next year.
Oh.
So,
The other thing to keep in mind is that there was, the contemplation in that road report was not that you would bond, you would have the money, and it would not be spent in this building season.
Right.
That's, the 275 took care of your maintenance and getting you through there. It was to have things in line, in place, and ready so that in the 2015 season, you were ready to hit the road running, so to speak. Bearing in mind too that you're not going to have a debt service payment on that until the 15 budget.
right.
So we're not impacting this budget. Even if we continue that process forward. Now, if we want to take some of that tower money and accelerate some of the work that we're doing now to help where we're going to go, because what we looked at in that was we kind of held that $2 million and looking at it and saying what's the amount of work that can be done in a 3-year build-out period. If you get some of it done now, there's still projects that would that can support that. So it's not that you're by doing that you've chopped a whole lot off there, because there's more down the road. All we're doing is now we're putting ourselves in a better position even going further forward.
So, you could pass a warrant article on bonding, not issue it until next spring,
Right.
and then and still put money into the account
Correct.
to 500,000
Yep.
and give them a head start.
Yeah, I mean, that's, that's the one nice thing we have with, if we go out, if the town does the bonding, is we have the control of when that issue is. If we went to the main bond bank, then we're limited to just the 2 different offerings a year. If we went to a commercial bank and tried to take out that way, there was negatives that, the bonding offered us the most positives and the least negatives. But it also offered us the most flexibility. It offers us flexibility on how we can structure payment. It can offer us flexibility on timing and things like that. So it gave us a whole lot more options on the table.
How long is that, if you pass a bond warrant, it would only be good for a year, I would assume, right?
That's a good question, we could get that clarified. I don't know that to be correct.
I mean, I think that's an important piece of all
I know
this.
there are guidelines on expending the bonds, obviously 3 years, but
3 years to expand.
but
Right.
issuance, a delay to issuance, I don't know the answer.
I mean, I know in the, state law, it's 5 years, but, yeah, like,
If you went under that scenario and you issued the bonds next spring, you could time it so the first
Right.
interest payment wasn't until the next calendar year. Is that what you
Right.
guys are discussing basically?
Steve?
When I first heard about the tower sale, the first thing that came to my mind was in fact the roads. And I'm willing to support any kind of hybrid combination as long as we can make sure that in fact that money is used in that direction. I started to see the tower money start to leak into other places through these alternatives, and that scares me a little bit. I think we have a golden opportunity with $2 million worth of road work that needs to be done. Basically 900,000, almost half of it, coming into the town. I really think it would be financially foolish not to take that money and put it into the needs. We have needs in the fire department, we have needs in the roads. I really would like to see it go there, and maybe it's a portion this building season, and then the rest is committed to the bond. But I would hate to see it just kind of flow in elsewhere in the budget.
And if I may, just so people understand just the dynamic of some of the larger numbers, and some know, and because we have the documents in front of us, is that we had a request for $2 million bond for the roads, which was vetted, went through a committee, came before the community, there's been a presentation. Through this budget cycle, both Public Works and Public Safety came back with a 5-year CIP. And when you took that 5-year CIP and took it just 4 years out, the total request from Public Safety and Public Works was an additional $1.5 million. So that brought us up to 3.5 to 3.6 million. If you were to take, and this was in my proposal, and I just want to flesh this out so we understand where we're at, if you were to take that 900,000 to reduce that cost from 3.6 million to, you take that 900,000, you're at, or 3.5 million, you're down to 2.4, 2.5 million dollars for your bond. So initially, we were asking for 2 million just for the roads. If you commit that 900,000, you're committing for your bond 2.5 to 2.6 million dollars. It's only 600,000 more. One of the issues that has kept on coming back to us time and time again, I think the community has probably been browbeat on the fact that we do things either the Raymond way or the cheap way, any way you want to discuss it, and that we go to surplus and we're buying used equipment, and Nate's spending more time working on it, and Dennis and Bruce have spent more time chasing around for parts on this old equipment. So we're not too far away from the same crisis we created on the roads that we've created in our equipment lines. And this is, as I think Steve just said, it's that golden opportunity. That time we have, it's just like any good business. We have a windfall profit year this year. And despite we are a poor community, I don't believe we are. I think we're positioned so well to do this because of the low rates of the bond, because of our auditable undesignated fund balance that's taken us many years to get to that point, where that auditable fund balance will actually withstand any kind of review by Standard & Poor's, not worrying about $48,000 in our possible liabilities for health insurance. We're talking about an auditable, undesignated fund balance of $2 million. We're strong financially. We've spent that 6 or 7 years. I wouldn't say we've been tax neutral. I would say we've been very fiscally responsible on how we've managed this town. And this is the one opportunity you have in every 10-year cycle is to actually do things that could keep us at a point where we've stabilized the potential for the mill rate from the municipal side, and still gained so much ground. And it's all because we took the daring initiative to sell a half an acre of land for $900,000.
What's the timing on that sale? Where does that stand?
It needs town meeting approval. It has to be a warrant at town meeting. I mean, I think we have a term sheet on it,
We do.
Yes.
ready to go. So it just needs town meeting approval, which would probably be one of the first articles, because I have a feeling the rest of the budget is gonna rely on that
And then-
900,000.
And then the town meeting's what, June 4th?
June 11th, oh yeah, June
11th.
4th is town meeting, the vote is the
And
11th.
then after that, what's the time lapse until you actually see a check for something?
Probably
900?
30 days or so, I would
Really,
guess.
is that fast?
Yeah.
That's fast.
Brian?
To Charlie's point, the windfall profit, I want to make sure, and I think we're doing the right thing here, so it's not just it's a word of caution that, absolutely right, we get the windfall profit. The thing that you have to also recognize that after that, we don't have $46,000 of ongoing income into the town. And so, I totally agree with the direction we're going. And, because we do have some other bonds that are coming up, and can be retired and the like, I wanna make sure that we're not looking at it, it's like, hey, we've got 900 and everything else is honky-dory all the way down. We're gonna actually have $46,000 less every year following.
And
Yeah,
that's
but
what-
remember, that's a 20-year revenue stream.
True, right. Oh, no, I'm totally in favor of it, Joe.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I just wanna make sure that we're keeping
However,
that mentally in mind.
As in my proposal, as it's stated, that's 1 year. Brian.
Yeah.
Because in year 2015-16, 3 bonds retire for the
And
total
that's
of
why I'm comfortable with it.
$307,000.
Yeah, that's why I'm
A
comfortable with it.
$2.6 million bond now at 2% is probably gonna cost us about $300,000 a year. So 1 year, next year, we're gonna have to keep at this and keep the ship of this economy on the rails, not off the rails. We can be LD1 compliant, get new equipment, get the roads fixed, still be LD1 compliant, not waver from that. 1 year will be a tough year next year, and we'll have to all do our homework and do this again without maybe as much contention. And then in fiscal year 2015-16.
But next year, if we time it right, next year, we'd only see 150 and the 300. Because we'd only have the first payment due. We wouldn't have.
If you do it halfway through, absolutely correct. Well,
If we time it right.
I stand corrected.
Well,
That's-
addressing the road improvement committee, if we were to give an extra 225,000 to the roads this year, to get them to 500,000, can we lower the bond to 1.775 for the roads?
In theory, you could, but that says that, you know, that, you know, if you look at, you have to look at the road maintenance program, because there are roads that are continuing
shape, yeah.
on after that. If we had taken care of all, you know, all the roads under that, then I would say yes, but we're not.
Okay.
You know, we looked at what could you do in that build-out period of the 3 years. So you still have, you know, that's a rolling.
I mean, the number from 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, was $6 million to do the roads. So,
So we've
But I mean,
come a long
you know, when
way.
we kind of looked at it, we looked at it from the standpoint of what's logical, you know, number one, what was a logical size of a bond to take out? Number two, what was a logical amount of work that could get done in that amount of time?
Well, one concern that I have, I'm all for the bonding idea conceptually, particularly for the roads. When you start bonding the capital improvements and you have a 5-year capital improvement plan, I think that's what is being proposed, and you have to expend it within 3 years, because that's the rule, and then you have a 10-year bond that you're repaying. The concern that staff has is the increment from the 5th year to the 10th year. You're still gonna have capital improvement needs during that timeline, and you're gonna have to plan for how you deal with that, in addition to paying the debt service on the bonds that you issue for the first 5 years.
And to that point, I believe in 2017-18, as I mentioned in my proposal, we will have another retiring $200,000 a year in other bonds, one of them being the public safety building.
The only flaw that I see, though, is that the proposal that you make depends on things like there will never be any more MWAC debt issued. I can tell you from experience, having served on the PERC committee, that as soon as the debt is retired, and I don't care what they tell you, they look at improvements to the plant, things wear out, there are reissued bonds, and you can say that MWAC is different, that it doesn't ever wear out, but I think you can't pretend that it's not going to wear out, you're not going to have additional debt sometime in the future. It's an old plant, it will have needs in the future, there will be other bonded indebtedness needs that will come up in the future. So I just say, don't plan for a future of no additional debt in any area. It's not realistic.
But I think actually, I haven't talked about the full 5-year CIP for fire and safety and public works. What we've addressed is 4 years, and these 4-year CIPs came forward from the departments, saying that these are numbers that they want us as, or whatever boards are sitting here in the future, these boards to consider. In 2014, this is what we're gonna need. In 2015, this is what we're gonna need. It just seemed like a natural, this is coming from the departments that have done the homework, saying in the next 4 years.
What we
these are
were
our
responding
equipment
to,
needs.
to be accurate, what we were responding to is an early budget meeting where the criticism was levied that we didn't have a full, fleshed out, full funded CIP. So what I tasked the department heads with doing was to do that, to show you what it would cost us to do that versus what we're doing now. Now, there's been a characterization that the equipment is, breaks down and it takes a lot of time and effort to repair. That's actually not true. I think the best program is a blending of what we're doing and also purchasing new. I would not abandon what we're doing. I think we've been creative. I think the reason you've had a flat budget for 6 years is because of that creativity and that effort of the department heads. So I think you would be unwise in the extreme to abandon that completely. However, if you wish to do that, and that was what the proposal was about, here's what it will cost you, here's the difference. It's a big, big difference.
So we are retiring next year, in 2014, $288,000 in debt service, which which would cover the $2 million bond going forward. So, Mike?
Ralph, can I ask a clarification on the road bond, or the road committee? The bond was in addition to maintenance.
Correct.
So we would still have our maintenance budget pretty much as we've had it, which would maintain, and this would be an improvement bond above that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments on bonding for the road? Are people in agreement that it's a good idea to bond $2 million for the roads?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With the caveat that the sale of the tower proceeds end up in the roads. I would hate to see us bond 2 million for the roads and turn around and use that, I was gonna say, use that money elsewhere.
Well, under what I threw out there, we would take $225,000 and put it into the road maintenance account. That would still leave us $675,000. And you can't, unless you're gonna take all 900,000 and put it into road maintenance, I'm not sure you wanna do that.
Why not?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
So, take all 900,000,
Yes.
just put it into the roads.
Yes,
We've kicked this can down the road.
yeah.
But then-
For years.
If you're gonna do that, why are you gonna bond right now? Other than that you have low interest rates.
So you would then bond,
Cash is king.
you would then bond to help with the CIP. I mean,
Correct.
It's a hybrid. You're
Right.
either gonna use some of the 900 for your CIP.
Either way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna have some for the, you're gonna,
That's why the package is, right now, it's a,
so, Joe, I took your question as, are we in favor of a road bond at 200 million? And then if we
2 million.
said, 2 million, sorry, 200 million, wow.
That'd be a good one for the state.
down the road, you know.
So,
Just had a big
if we know we're in favor of the 2 million bond for the roads, and then we're gonna talk about the CIP separately, we will get a total number, and then we can decide, back out from a total number, come backwards from that to decide, is it 900,000 to the roads right off the bat? Is it 900 or 500, then 400,
If I remember, what is the CIP for next year? Is it like 200,000 or
for
400,000?
which, for 14, 15, Joe?
Yeah, between the fire department and
490.
public works.
400 this year, 490 next year, 145 the year after.
So, why can't we take 400,000 of that 900 and do the CIP for next year?
For 13, 14,
Yeah,
and then 225 to the roads to get it going.
right,
Have the bond next spring.
right.
And just make sure that we are spending on either CIP or roads. And then we're bonding for what's left of roads and CIP. Is that what you were hoping?
Well, so close. I have to invoke a little background on my grandmother. Growing up, this is when I think about this budget. It really hit me hard. When we go and visit my grandmother, basically would be, this is what's going to happen today. What you have to do, what you need to do, and then what you want to do. And she would always choose what we wanted to do, but that was a separate issue. So I looked at this budget, and in the town of Raymond, what do we have to do? Okay, we have to provide public safety. There are things we have to do. Well, the roads, clearly, in my opinion, fall under that need to do basis. There's other things in this budget that are clearly, as you were talking about, let the citizens decide, are in the want to do category. But the reason I am so convinced that we need to take that 900,000 is that those roads are a need to do issue. They aren't a want to do. They're not quite. They're getting close to a have to do issue. But to keep them out of the have to do category, I think they're definitely a need to do, and we need to fund the have to do's and the need to do's first. Once we're done with that, then, and I think to a certain degree, the CIP, there's a little bit of a want to do in there. Kind of what Mr. Willer was saying is as a hybrid of what they're doing now versus buying all new. Buying all new is a real want to do. So I'm not convinced that taking 400,000 and giving them a brand new dump truck is the best use of that money.
Ralph, one of the things that came out of the road study was a practical notion of how much can you do per year. So if we were talking 900,000, that would be very difficult to spend in Raymond. I'm sort of looking at Nate here, to spend in 1 year. If you had 900 plus, you've already got the 200 in there. I mean, could you spend 1.1 million a year?
You'd have council to do it.
And
You'd
it's,
probably have, yeah, you could do it.
you couldn't do it this year,
Sub it out.
right?
Well,
It's,
paving is subbed out, yeah. We sub that out to paving.
right, it's all, but in terms of ordering that where it's April 1st for this year, you're not gonna be in a position to spend 1.1 million in 13.
I would agree with that, yes.
Right.
But you could carry it forward.
You would have to, you wouldn't be approved till June anyway, so you're already you're
Right,
already
so
2
you
months
wouldn't
into,
be-
you're already 2 months
You
into the
need to do
construction.
some planning
Yeah,
anyway.
you're
There
2
was-
months into the
Yeah,
construction.
there's
Quite a bit of
planning.
planning
And
process prior to.
that was what, that, and that's where the, where the contemplation was, in timing the bonding, so that come, as soon as ice out and frost out next year, you can be going
Okay.
flat out.
The other concern I have, and maybe, again, it might have been too much to absorb all at once, the 3.5 and the 3.6, and taking in the 4 years of CIP, I thought that was a reasonable way to go. My concern with parceling out just a portion of that 900,000 is, where does that money go? My thought is it goes into the undesignated fund balance, which is a place it doesn't have to go. We're good in the undesignated fund balance. So where does it go? Where do we give the commitment to the people in this town that when we get money like this and we know there's a critical need, it's almost as though if you want to take and reserve the discussion of the public works and public safety CIP to another time, that would be great. So then why wouldn't we only go for a $1.1 million bond and throw the 900,000 into the roads and get a lower bond, wait a year, and when we have $300,000 a year coming back from 3 retired bonds in 15, 16, then get back at a hybridized system of capital improvements. The concern I have is, and I think, Steve, you articulated it, is once that money comes in, it starts to, and we've seen it, and that's why we haven't done a good job of taking care of the roads. We see it get parceled off and pieced out, and all of a sudden, we sold the piece of land, we don't have the $42,000 a year income for the next 7 years. I believe that's as long as that lease is, because we're gonna have to renegotiate the lease if they still are using cell phone towers or in 7 years, we don't know. So there's always a little risk. The reward to me and why I was anxious to take the 900,000 is it's a reward. And the risk in 7 years, we don't know where technologies will be. And it was an opportunity to say, we have, as a community, come together and said, we have not taken care of our roads and we're all to blame. Mostly the people sitting at this table. And this is that opportunity, so then take the 900 and reduce your bond request to 1.1 million and hope that the Federal Reserve is right, which you have more faith in Bernanke than I do, in terms of where interest rates will be a year from now, or 2.
Marcia?
Are you suggesting there's a downside to this sale? Is there
Well,
something in there we should be aware of, or?
Well, I think the downside is in 7 years from now, in 2020, when we renegotiate, or Crown Castle comes back to us to renegotiate, and those properties are worth more for cell phone towers, or for towers. And we cashed in 900 in 2013, and we couldn't have negotiated with them in 2020 for more money. That's the risk.
Well, that's opportunity cost that we won't see, I understand that, but there's no
Yeah,
other
no.
downside to it?
Not that,
Okay.
I mean, Mr. Bruno and I were probably the first
I-
two people
Flip a coin.
who said that we ought to really seriously consider moving forward and investigating this offer from them.
Once this
Why didn't you go for
transaction,
$1 million?
yeah,
Their initial offer was 750,000.
Then you did good.
Thank you. So,
We also did a study to see what these things are worth,
Right.
and
Oh,
and
yeah.
we are very good on the number.
Yep, that's.
moving on from this bond issue, some of the other questions are some of the proposals that people put forward. For example, we have $10,000 from the town of Gray that they don't wanna give us anymore for service on Brown Road and Gore Road. Question is, do we capitulate to that and say, no, we're gonna do it as, you know, a nice neighbor, or are we gonna stand firm and say, no, it's gonna cost you $10,000 if you want us to respond? Charlie?
Well, related to that, and there's gonna be some tough politics. We played hardball with Gray last year, and so they're playing hardball in a way with us this year. But I've seen the chief has had some very collegial and respectful communications back and forth with their department. To me, what I'd like to, it's related, because it's revenue, is where do we stand with Fry Island? That, to me, that's the key. I don't expect us, that the town of Gray expects the town of Raymond to say yes to this, they're cutting out the $10,000, where they're saying to us, well, you're gonna keep servicing the same area you serviced, and we're gonna say to all the folks in the town of Raymond who have never been serviced to that degree from Gray, that in 2 months' time, you guys are gonna agree for us to take over all the service area on North Raymond Road. That's just not, even in cutthroat politics, that's not gonna be doable, because I believe we're gonna have to hear back from that North Raymond community that if the chief can negotiate the response times, which are great and can do that work, my question is, where are we with Fry Island? Because if we're at the end of that deal, that's too good of a deal for them, and that's my opinion, and that there's the made-up revenue right there, if we can do
Chief.
that.
Yes, right now Fry Island is pretty much status quo. They've changed some of the configuration of the structure of their ambulance service that they're gonna provide over there. It hasn't changed anything. They still require us to transport, they require us for paramedic service, and they still require us for fire services over on the island. They do have a small crew, and I don't see that changing a whole lot. There's some talks of reconfiguring a couple of things that they do, like transport for basic calls, and to be honest, we just don't see that happening.
How long is that contract for? I don't remember.
I would have to ask Nancy and see if she's familiar. I'm not. Okay,
See, that's the point, I think that's pretty
I
much
think it's 3 years.
We've already met with them and they
Right.
agreed for this next year.
Yeah,
at
they have for this year.
15,000. And that's where,
I guess one of the answers, Don, that we need is how long the Fry Island contract is for. So to go with the answer on the bond, how long you can issue it for, and
yeah,
how long is the Fry Island contract for?
what was it, 2? And
I
that's
think it's 3, but I think it has 2 more, as I remember some of the details. I may be wrong, but we'll have to look at it.
We can get that out to you.
Okay.
But it seems to me that, the whole issue is, the whole issue is boiling down to response time, correct?
Yes, on the island is,
No.
okay, we're talking the North Raymond.
If I'm
okay,
talking,
okay,
if I'm
switching
back,
gears.
if I switch gears and I
Yeah,
go back to
go
Gray
Gray.
Hills, the whole issue is response time, correct?
Correct.
What would it cost Gray to get the response time that we can give them? If we said no, what would it cost them to get that?
They would have to physically build a station and staff it. in that
Exactly.
area in order to do so.
Exactly, that's my point. So they're arguing from a weak standpoint. If we say no, they're gonna have to spend a heck of a lot more than $10,000 to get the same response time that they can get from us right now.
but if I
Yes,
may,
no.
Chief, maybe
No.
you
You know,
want,
now,
because that response
there's a
time
flip
door
side that
swings both
says, okay,
ways.
they're
It does.
responding a little bit
Yeah.
quicker on some things, but.
Correct.
you know,
I'm not sure if you've seen some of the data that
Yeah.
are provided or not, and I think it's very compelling when you look at it. And to your point, Mr. Lovett, I've also had some conversations with some of the folks up there, and actually had a phone call from a resident up there a short while ago who was very concerned that Gray wasn't their responding unit, because they are that much closer. One of our members who's on the department and a resident in that area has also come forward and said that this would be good for him as well. But, so there's a couple folks that we have talked with, and we have gotten some feedback. But you're right, that door does swing both ways, and in that area, we're 15, 20 minutes to get an ambulance to those folks in need up there. And right now, we're seeing that shift in call volume, and we have to remember that that's very fluid. we could go 50 times to the Gray area in the lake this year, and they could go 20, and that could flip, as it has for us. There were 2 calls just Saturday up on the North Raymond Road that would have been handled by Gray rather than us.
And Chief, just for comparison,
Yes.
15 to 20 minutes for us to respond, and how quick for Gray to respond to the North Raymond Road area?
6 to 8 minutes.
So you tell
in
me
most
from
of
your
that area.
professional capacity that 9 to 12-minute difference in response time from an ambulance, what does that mean?
In a
to-
trauma or critical medical call,
Right.
that is
So,
absolutely critical.
I don't think it's a done, I don't think we wanna get entrenched in that argument because of $10,000 right now. Or you go build a station, like I said, we dealt with them last year and they called us all sorts of names. And I can understand why the town manager or the chair of these boards would be upset, because they called us a bunch of names, the select board and, or the council in Gray, about we're cutthroats and we're nasty. That's only because the reality of the situation was we were doing their work for nothing. And we finally came to them, just like Fry Island in a way. They don't help us with the roads, they want parking lots, but they don't have any money for us. And that's the way Gray was, and that's why it got a little nasty last year. I don't
Yes.
think that's the tone. We've worked with regionalization before, we've been successful sometimes, not as successful in others, and this one, when I started seeing those response times, I had a hard time saying, off the cuff, just saying no, because
Another piece of that whole equation that we've got to consider as we look at this going into the future is when we negotiated that first contract, was it 2 or 3 years, 2 years now, I guess, ago, Gray was not staffing with a full-time paramedic or around-the-clock paramedic coverage, which did make it very unequal, if you will, when we looked at Gore Road, Brown Road versus North Raymond Road. And now they are covering their shifts 24/7 with paramedic coverages as we are. So now it's a more equitable trade if we look at it in that respect.
Thank you, Chief. Bob?
Just a clarification, when we do respond to Brown Road, Gray, in Gray, Gore Road as well, how is that billing handled? Is it handled through Raymond Fire Department, so there is revenue for those calls, or do we turn over those calls to Gray and they do the billing?
Currently, we turn the call over to the town of Gray. They handle the billing on that, as we do up here on the North Raymond Road. Those are our calls, we bill for them. If we respond to the Lake Road area in Gray and end up transporting because Gray is on another call or tied up, then we do that billing for that call. But generally, it's transferred over to the Gray unit, they bill for it. So we lose that revenue stream, as we will be talking, losing a revenue stream on the other side of it, I suppose. There will be calls we don't bill for.
Go ahead. I have an unrelated,
no, go
but
ahead.
I want,
I'm good.
Chief, I just wanted, since you're up there.
Yes.
In the CIP, and this is, looked at this and looked at this, on the ambulance replacement program, you were talking about every 3 years, $100,000, and that shows up later in the CIP, but I was wondering, why is 13, 14, 180 for an ambulance?
The first ambulance that we're talking about, Rescue One, will be over the mileage and isn't within that contract. In other words, it's an outside brand. It's something we bought prior to this deal being fostered, I suppose. So as it will be over on its mileage, it will be over on its age, and it's not in the same brand, if you will. As we get into this program, if we do get into it, what it will allow is within the same brand, within the years specified, which I think was 4 years, yes, it should be 4 years, and under a certain amount of mileage, we'll be able to trade a unit in, thus bringing the price of the ambulances down to what you see there in the out years. The first one of this other unit will be a difference. And it will keep the units under warranty, so we thought this was a good plan to kind of bring forward and
But the one
discuss.
one you're looking at buying for 180 will be in that brand, and
Yes.
it will be in the program, but won't get the program price.
Correct, initially, right.
You don't have one to trade in on this
Yeah,
purchase.
we don't have a trade-in.
And I'm done, if I could, I would like to just put the rest, a few things that we could take care of tonight, if we can. I would just like to ask, is there consensus, because one of the proposals, not mine, that's been put forward, has gone back to let's take $35,000 out of the $275,000 for road maintenance. And that's not, and I wanted to make that point clear, that was not part of my proposal. I think, can we all agree at least on one thing, that going forward in this budget, we're gonna leave the road maintenance at what was asked for by the road improvement committee at the 275 and not raid that again?
My proposal is to increase it to 500,000.
Well, at least, I mean,
So that
and I
would
think
keep
that's
the
a,
35 in.
but what, that seems to be one area, at least I wanna believe, and I only bring it up because in one of the proposals, it came back to the 240 again. And I'm not at all suggesting that at all. I mean, we've already rated that account so many times that I could just ask, is there somewhat agreement that we leave that alone, the 275 CIP for road maintenance?
Or higher.
Well, at least leave it alone. Let's go with the lower number, the number that's on the table and then, does anybody wanna see us go back to the 240? No? No. Okay, so that's one place that I just would like to.
Can we, what part of your proposal was to, go after some of the health and dental insurance?
This is, as I said, it was all pretty well
Right.
negotiable. So, for instance, okay, we said it would cost the town $32,000 for a 2% increase. So if I could simplify, we had a proposal, the first proposal put forward to us that was showing $161,000 over LD1. A $60,000 increase in the budget going from last year to this year, which was allowed under LD1, and then a $161,000 increase. It just seemed to me, rather than keep mechanizing over each of these line items, is that we say, look, if we can find a place to save $161,000, come in LD compliant, get our bonds up and running, that our real task is to see where could we save $161,000. So one thing, so you go, let's just simplify it. $32,000 for a 2% increase, $16,000 for a 1% increase. I hope I don't demoralize the town staff, that's not my intention, but if you got a 1% increase, that's probably you've heard me say this before, the private sector, a lot of the private sector, and we've heard it from speakers, aren't getting any increases, or over the last few years haven't gotten any. I think only once in 6 years have we not given an increase. If I'm correct, it was only 1 year we had a.
1 year we didn't give an increase, but I think it would be also correct to say that the town has historically tried to benchmark with our neighboring and competing towns, and the other towns and other entities are going with a 2% increase this year. I think that if you take the idea that you're going to balance the budget on the employees significantly, which is your proposal, I think that does demoralize the employees. I can speak for them and tell you that isn't a positive thing to do.
And if I may, that's benchmarking that's good in a theoretical sense, but we're talking hard numbers now. So if I may, just let me, health insurance. I defy anybody to come to me and show me where they have a no deductible health plan. No deductible. Single family, 2-person, 100%, family plan, 85% paid by the employer, and a no deductible.
I think we provided a spreadsheet that
So,
shows.
but if you may, Don, let me just finish. So if you were to go and say to the employees and to the public, you know what, we're gonna ask our employees to pay a $500 deductible. That $500 deductible, that's all you're asking for, not for anything else, is an $8,000 savings to the budget. So there's 16,000, there's 8,000. So what you've said to employees is, give me a 1% and we'll go into a $500 deductible. I don't, again, if I can see the benchmarks that show that there's people out there, except for a few individuals, getting a 0 deductible plan, I would probably be convinced not to offer that.
Yeah.
If you saved and you put the money into the bonds, and you have a CIP request for equipment for this year from Public Works and Public Safety of a total that if you reduce both of those lines, because now you've put that money into the bonds, you've saved $70,000. Well, there's 86,000, we're getting pretty close. And I don't wanna run this portion of the discussion. I want to have as much, and I'm sure we all do, wanna have this input from people at this table. But You're getting to 161, and with those 3 items right there, you're totaling $86,000 towards that goal.
Well, I guess the question that you need to put out is, how does the committee feel?
Right, well, that's the discussion portion.
I watched too much of that community TV, but, Wyndham, School District, they're going for a 1% raise. So I think it's saying that everyone is going 2%, it's not quite accurate. The school system is going 1%.
Is that for their teachers also, or is that just their staff?
I was watching the public works section of it. It was
The information we got direct from administration that's in your packet, I want
Okay,
to clear that.
it's television, it's for the record. It was 1%. If you look at your spreadsheet, the town of Wyndham has a $500 deductible. It's reasonable. My company, small company, my deductible is $2,500, and it's not paid by the company of anything. So, on the health insurance side,
Did you look at the family side of that? Did you take a look at that at all?
on the town of Wyndham,
The town of Raymond?
6,000.
Did you take a look at that?
yeah.
Did you take a look at that compared to the competing towns and entities?
But we pay 3,000 of that now, so if you just ask for a $500 deductible, you're gonna pay 2,500 of that, of the single plan, and 2,500 of that of the family plan.
No.
And there's only,
It's 3,500. It's not 3,000 each way.
It's a
There's
$3,500
zero deductible.
right?
You only get 3,000 of your 6,000 back.
yeah, and there's only 3 people on the family plan. What are we talking about here? We've got one of those people on the family plan is 100%, 100%. So take that out. We got 2 people on a family plan. Are we here arguing over, we're putting someone on the spot for having to, we're saying we're gonna go with a $500 deductible, and we're still gonna pick up the rest of that tab. So it's a modification of Mr. Bruno's plan of $500 per person. That's what it is. And that savings is $8,000, because it's 500 times 16. I don't know, you've gotta look at the census, Mike. Health insurance is a very complex subject that you can't just throw the balls in the air. You have to look at the census, and the census in this town is we don't have that many family plans.
So we should disadvantage the people who do use the family plan?
We're not saying disadvantage.
Well, that's what you're
We're
saying.
negotiating running
For
the town.
$8,000, that's what you're saying.
We're saying we're
Exactly.
negotiating what needs to be done to keep this town on the fiscal tracks and not off the tracks.
$8,000 on the overall budget is gonna keep the town on the track, Mr. Levitt?
$161,000, you can attain that fairly simply tonight. We could probably pass this budget tonight if we took that opportunity, or at least come to consensus.
Joe?
Yeah.
I've been pretty straightforward about the fact that I'm not convinced we need to have an LD1 compliant budget. Can I get a feeling from other folks if that's their goal tonight? Is everybody's goal here to find $161,000 or to have an LD1 compliant budget? I'm just curious.
Personally, I think the LD one is the tail wagging the dog. I think it's something to shoot for. I think we shouldn't be constrained by it.
But it works.
Bob?
My feeling is that the more and more that you cut, you're gonna see more of an erosion of services, core services that we've discussed in the past. We've had a flat budget, we stay under LD1 compliance, but there's gonna be that time where we have to get over that boundary.
I mean, I go back to the opening, that budget, as it is presented right now, is a 20-cent increase on the mill rate. Probably a little high for me, but I could, I would like to work to getting 161,000. I'm not sure not gonna, the only way I think you can reasonably get there is to use some undesignated fund balance. And, either that or you're gonna have an increase. I don't see how you cut to get the 161,000. I'm having a hard time with it.
Well, if you look at the second alternative, the alternative 2 provided by the manager, I assume the town manager, or is it department managers? That brings us below LD1 compliance.
what we're using the sale of the tower to do that.
Yeah.
It's in essence another,
And
it's another
we're
trick.
kicking back, I believe we're kicking back
That-
road
that-
maintenance to
that took-
240.
That took 35 out
See
there.
right here?
Yeah, I don't even see that as that's a non-starter.
You know, I mean,
And we're not cutting, we're
We're
just lessening.
lessening the increases, Bob. We're
It's
not,
no
and I
cuts.
think we've seen that in these discussions, in school budget discussions in the past. They're not cuts. The community has to understand that. There's increases. There's an increase with LD1 of $60,000 for this budget. It's a total $220,000 increase overall that was originally asked for. We're not cutting services. As a matter of fact, if we went with a reasonable CIP approach for fire and public works, we'd be increasing capability. We'd be taking some of the people out of the field who are doing maintenance work and putting them in the field doing what they're supposed to be doing, fighting fires, emergency response, and paving the roads.
I mean, if you,
I'd gladly take last year's numbers for a budget.
And don't forget, LD1, when people say LD1 has worked for this town. That's why we're in such financially good shape that we are, is because we've stayed disciplined. And I think that's what a lot of folks are forgetting. We've gone away from the gimmick of using the overlay. And I can go back and tell you, there were years that the overlay, for those of you who don't understand, is this board would come to you and say, here's the mill rate, and then we'd go back in September and say, well, we're gonna raise the mill rate with the overlay. And we used it artificially for many years. We don't do that anymore. We don't use the undesignated fund balance, so that we've got it to a point where the auditors, not what this select board says, but what the auditors say we should have. This town is financially sound. We haven't done it on the backs of the employees. We haven't done it for a lack of services. Because as my colleagues have said in the past, they don't get a lot of phone calls from people saying, the fire department stinks, or the public works department stinks. We don't get those calls, myself included. I get a lot of calls.
Two things I would point out. One, to say, you've gone 6 years now, 7, to say that you're always gonna have an LD1 compliant budget, you're always gonna have that happen, I think is a stretch. A lot of the towns that, you know, that people have been banting around, is envying and so forth, because they're so fiscally conservative. One real close to us had an LD1 increase a few years ago. We didn't. I mean, a lot of towns have already done that. We didn't. And to say that you're always going to leave that money in the bank, that surplus, and you're just gonna continue to add to it forever and ever, and you're never gonna touch that asset, because that's a gimmick to use your financial resources, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. It's not a gimmick, it's a choice. It's a budgetary choice that you've chosen as a group, which I respect, but it's not a gimmick. Previous boards of selectmen, which I've served, took a different approach of it. Future boards could take a different approach of it or not. So, I mean, it's a resource, it's something you can utilize if you want to. I'm not advocating you do, but to say that you should never touch it is not correct.
And if I may,
That's not correct.
Mr. Willard, the term gimmick was your term.
It was not my term.
It
It was not my
you
term.
and Mr. Bruno, and I will bring up the documents. That's when we started going down that road of saying we need to eliminate. So it's not a gimmick. Don't say shut him up, Sam. That's improper, please.
Guys,
M, I said M. Mr. Chairman,
well, let me recognize Mr. Linday and then I'll come
I think it's
here.
important, one thing to consider, looking at the alternative 2, the manager's proposal, this has already reduced the budget request by $100,000. In all these other items, if you take that number, plus what we're talking about from the standpoint of raises and deductibles, we're way past that. We're there.
Yeah, but that,
So we've saved money in recycling, we've saved money in all these other areas,
but what you're doing is you're taking money out of the CIPs.
but then we use the $900,000 in the bond, and that's, the money comes back.
Comes back. It's there.
Well, that's where you're using the $106,000.
No, forget the bottom part. Just the excise, X out that part. I'm saying that adjustments to gross municipal budget, minus $100,000. That's all I'm focusing on,
Okay.
all right? Throw the paving CIP back in there,
You're at 65.
okay? And then look at the raises and the deductible and those issues, and
What about the public works CIP? What
that goes
about-
in the bonding with the $900,000. Or it's delayed, as it's been discussed, into future years. And again, that goes back to what I'm talking about, somewhat of a, sorry Nate, but a $110,000 dump truck is kind of a want. not a need.
Well, I mean, you're talking,
But-
I think it's replacing a 2006 dump truck.
But you're doing it from a new,
A 1988 truck it's
with a
replacing?
new truck versus a used truck.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, we were lucky to get a used truck last time, and that's the thing. These trucks, you can't find them used right now, if I remember. They, come on up.
That, $110,000 is a wheeler dump truck. It's a target number. I'm hoping to do it for less. If we find a used truck, we definitely do it for less. I don't wholeheartedly disagree. We don't need a new, brand new wheeler dump truck for that position.
Joe, I think we've,
Yeah, Marshall?
I just want to get a number clear in my head, and if we take a look at option number one, which,
Alternative one?
right, which
Okay.
puts us over LD one, that increase over LD one is roughly 175,000. Am I looking at that correctly?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. So if we just as is go with option number one, we'd have to ask the town for another 175,000 to increase that LD one, is that correct?
It's 175,000 on top of last year's
60s.
budget.
Okay.
And 60, so it's a $235,000.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Dana?
If we do need a dump truck, that's where I can see using the undesignated fund balance. Let's go out and buy one, because we can afford it, we've done it before. We could do it again, pay cash for the darn thing.
The last one we bought, we took, I think, 60,000
Yeah.
out of the,
CIP,
no, we took it out of the selectmen contingency fund.
yep. And then we took some out of CIP too, Joe, I believe.
I don't remember.
We took some up from the fire department.
Okay.
And then, to get to Marshall's comment, on the, once you set that over LD one, that's the base for next year.
I understand that.
Okay.
Well,
Now the base is better.
Well, that's semantics, Dana.
Yeah.
That's semantics that's being used. We can get that clarified.
Yeah.
There's a difference between exceeding LD1 and increasing
you
LD1.
can, well, it depends how you word your.
Right.
Correct.
Depends how you word.
So far, everything's been
You can,
increased.
you can adjust it to base, in which
Yeah.
case then it becomes a new base, or you can
Right.
do it as a one-time, you can do it as a one-time override.
And the language for that, Ralph, is if you increase it, it's an adjustment to base. If you exceed it, it's a one-shot deal. So,
So-
that again, we've seen increase the whole time, which is meaning we're increasing the base for, infinitum.
On alternative two, 80,000 of that 100,000 is CIP
Right.
in one form or another. So, I mean, you really have about $20,000 in cuts.
You know, I mean, we, you know,
And it's still leaving, if you took $20,000 out of the Public Works CIP, and you took 50,000 out of Fire Rescue CIP, but those were replaced by the bond money, that's a $70,000 savings.
Yeah,
And it's still leaving, I believe, and I can look it up, but Nate and Bruce, it's still leaving money in your CIP budgets. Right? I think it leaves how much in yours?
You also have to add
25,000
back
in public safety, and it leaves how much in yours?
add back to 35.
How much?
the 20.
25 in
Yeah,
yours.
add back
It's
to
not
35.
depleting them down to zero.
You have a January 2014 bond payment that you're not gonna be making, so you really, right, cause that's on the plus side, so you would take that out of there.
The bond interest number, Joe, is that
Right.
what you're looking at, January
Yeah.
2014
Yeah, that-
bond?
I
is to-
bumped that, we can bump that to
Right.
the next fiscal year, that 20,000, so there's, and if you're using that proposal, which is kinda, we're kinda getting all these proposals, mine included, and I think if we stuck to the base where we were at to begin with, and then tinkered with that,
I mean, the question that, you know, the question that was on the floor initially was, you know, where, you know, in regards to LD1, you know, we think that's a hard ceiling, or is that a soft ceiling? And, you know, I mean, I've always, you know, I mean, I've always had a problem with LD1, the way that it was written, the way that, you know, the way it was set up, so, you know, and we have held ourselves year to year to year on that. and we have never really asked the question to the town people, do they think that's a hard ceiling? You know, I mean, you get to the point where we've done everything, we've whittled down, we've pulled things out of here, there, and everywhere. And where is that line finally crossed? And, you know, as much as I hate to say it, if we had to exceed it by some, I wouldn't have as big a heartburn right now as I would have maybe in a couple of years ago, because of where I've seen us have to cut and take things out, and we're down to the point where we found whatever fat there was, and you're now cutting into muscle.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that you can cut anymore. I mean, you know, I just, we offer the core services of the roads, education, curbside pickup. Other than that, I mean, where else do you go?
Yeah.
So, how about these proposals
I
from?
think Marshall has to have.
Well, just as a comment, I think that it would be reasonable to ask the town to exceed one time, LD one this year, because we've got that 900,000 coming in on the back end, which would bring us back into compliance in subsequent years. So I think a one-time increase to that would be reasonable.
Peter?
Where do we think the school is gonna come out? All I've seen is some press on it that is just telling how great they're doing. I don't see
I
any cash.
saw one number that their increase is around 880,000, which we would absorb 36% of it, I believe, which is about 330,000.
Yeah, we're looking at another increase from the
Yeah.
school.
Now, last year it was 8.3%. I look at my total tax bill, when I write the check, I don't much care where it goes at that point. And I think that's true of most people, but we're spending hours on a little piece of it, the smallest piece. The school will spend hours on it too, but after a couple of meetings, whoosh, the floodgates will open. And, you know, I hate to see the town employees take a small whipping when you go down to the Wyndham Town Hall and there's a big group that are being handed the whip and say, go get it. So I don't really see these small changes having a big effect. I like where we were going earlier, discussing the bonds, hitting the roads, they need it, and I think we're pretty much on the right track. The LD1 increase, if we have to have it, okay, I'd rather not, because I think it sends the wrong signal, but apparently the school doesn't have to do that.
Well,
We
they
do.
still-
Oh, they
both-
do.
Both still are gonna have to
Okay.
pass a vote.
They still gotta
by
pass.
the people.
Pass it. But do they have we vote, yes, but is there a limit there? Like, they don't have an LD1 equivalent.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, well,
But,
it's,
I mean, they go out to referendum
yeah,
and
it's
people.
different, it's handled differently.
Right. We have two requests from two groups in town. 5,000 for the library and 5,000 for RWPA. How do people feel about those increases? Steve?
I've actually talked to a number of people who use the library, and the response I've gotten back is they would have no problem whatsoever paying for a library card. I would not have no problem supporting the library increase if in fact they would look at some type of revenue generation for library cards so that in the future they can become more self-sufficient and simply start charging for library cards. You know, if you look at, I'm not sure how many you have out, but $5 for a library card. It's gonna help reduce the need from this town.
How do other people feel? It's a 14.5% increase, which is what sits badly with me. Mike?
And I think that's one of those you send out to the town meeting. You send it at the requested item and let's have a discussion.
Well, you still have to balance your budget somehow.
But I guess what I said earlier is, I don't think you have to balance your budget. I think that becomes part of an LD1 override. Or
Yeah.
not, with the understanding the townspeople are gonna know that if they vote for it.
Well, no, you still have to balance your budget.
Well,
Your warrants have to balance.
Correct. But it could come down if the town doesn't feel it wants to support it.
Marshall?
As I said before, the salaries increase and the fundraising flatlines. I'd like to see more of an effort on their part.
Dana?
I look at it the same way as Marshall, and I'd like to add that sometimes you can't grow your programs as quickly as you want to. You gotta, you know, they've got more salaried people now, part-time or full-time, but they're spending more on salaried people. But if it means cutting back on a program, you know, you hate to see that happen, but, you know, they also have a substantial amount in the bank to work with.
Charlie?
Again, I don't look at $5,000 or $6,000 as trifling sums. I look at it when you're trying to whittle down 161,000. You look at every area. In my proposal, the way I look at it, and I don't have a problem, my end, with saying, knowing that next year may be a little bit more difficult until we get to the retiring bonds in fiscal year 15, 16, I would be very happy with half of those increases for both of those organizations, of saying 25,000, and that's not untypical. I know the library and Raymond Waterways didn't do it, but in government parlance, it's you shoot high and you negotiate low. We say that all the time, and I won't say when we say that, usually in executive session. That's just typical negotiating, but it's not cutting the underpinnings under it. It's just a recognition that we're not balancing this budget on the backs of the employees. We're looking at everything, as we would with, and I've proposed this before, it's a very simple $3,000 low-hanging fruit, which I think now has been incorporated into the infrastructure thinking. We go to the Gulick Fund, and we fund Raymond Soccer and Raymond Rec's request. That's $3,000 more. So right there, you've got a $8,000 savings in the budget. I mean, you just keep doing that, and I'd be more than willing, if we're gonna go with exceed or increase LD1 and go to the folks and say, the reason why we're going for an LD1 override is because we're balancing on the backs of our employees, because we're giving them a 1% raise and asking for a $500 deductible. I mean, I think that's being characterized in a very negative way. It's a very positive sense to me, from the private sector point of view, from where people are in this community and every community throughout the United States. If you were to say to them that your plan is a $500 deductible, 85% paid for by employer, family, and 100%, you're not gonna have, I don't present that as a negative. I look at that as we're still making progress, we're still recognizing our employees, and none of my proposal, and again, another one I wanted to make absolutely clear, in my proposal, I did not at any time say that we should be taking $22,000 out of travel and training for fire rescue. Absolutely not. There are areas in this that if we do our homework and come to a consensus, there's many, many opportunities and things that are preserved and increased, both from a health and safety point of view, taking care of the mold problem at Town Hall, to improving our equipment, keeping our employees at a point where we're providing at least some kind of recognition for their work. But there's another 25, 25, 5, and 3, that's another $8,000 right there.
So-
And I don't know if the library or Raymond Waterways thinks that's a bad proposal or a good proposal, it's just that's my thinking on
My
it.
thinking on it is that's pretty generous.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a 3% increase. You know, so $1,000 to the library, and, you know, I could probably live with $1,000 for Raymond Waterways, because they're asking for a 33% increase. I mean, so you give them $1,000, you're still giving them, you know, a 7% increase, I guess it is, right?
Is there a way to Mike's point about allowing the town to make a decision? I understand we have to kind of still work it through the budget, but my concern is if we have a cap on most of our warrants, you know, you can't go above that. Is there a way to, I don't know, to to kind of put it to the townspeople to say, how much do you value these things? And, you know, do you see this as good use of your tax dollars? And I think a good deal of this budget is complex enough that the town needs our guidance in putting it together on some of these things, and the ones that Mike made the point on, I think.
I think, Brian, you run into an area where you're shirking your responsibility, where you just say, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here, how long have I looked at this budget now? For
Yeah.
25, 30 hours of my time? And to just go to town meeting and say, what do you think? You know, with no background on what's been happening for the
Well,
last
just
5,
on those
6
items which are very,
You're either
which
gonna
are-
have closed warrants or open warrants.
Yeah.
You can't pick and choose which
yeah,
one.
and that's the concern, is that we say, let's just say we said $2,500 or whatever, then, and someone's going, gee, I really wished it had been 5, you know, I don't know. So that's the challenge.
Steve?
On Brian's, continue on that idea, could we in fact present an LD1 compliant budget with an option saying, okay, town members, if you want these, if you want these want-to-haves, list them out, library, you're gonna have to, you can vote them in, but you're gonna have to vote in, I don't wanna say an increase, and you're gonna have to vote in to exceed LD1. Kind of a combined vote is knowing that voting for these things will in fact take us over that. So here's our base budget, which we've come to agree on, and it's compliant. Now, townspeople, if you really want all these other goodies, you need to vote to exceed LD1. Now, I don't think I'm shirking my responsibility. My responsibility is to bring in a budget that is compliant, I believe. Now, if the townspeople want to say, no, we want to spend more money, that's for them to do, not for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you write that warrant.
I'm not sure either.
That's a tough.
That becomes a check.
Mike?
Joe, would you,
Sean back?
would you write something along the lines of, I'm gonna pick on the library again. The library requests $40,000. The select board recommend X dollars. The budget committee recommends X dollars. So it starts at the 40, but the town sees what each of the committees recommends, and then the discussion goes from there. I don't
Then
know
it
if,
becomes, whoever makes the motion on the amount, that's what you discuss at that point.
which is usually a board member, so I suppose you'd have to say, would you make a gentleman's agreement that, which is tough in town government, isn't it, that says,
There
all
are
right,
rules-
who's
there are
recognized
rules.
first?
The gentleman's agreement gets us in problems, because we have to define gentlemen.
No, it wouldn't matter in that case if it was written that way, because an amendment could be issued to go back to the other recommendation. And then you'd vote the amendment, and then depending on where the amendment went, then that's the amount that you would end up voting.
No, it wouldn't be an amendment.
If-
Whoever stands up and makes the motion.
Right.
Saying, if the warrant says 40,000, someone stands up and says, I make a motion to approve 35,000, you're arguing the 35,000 at that point.
Right, but can't that motion be amended?
The motion can fail,
It can fail, and then.
and then you bring it back.
Right.
And then,
Different total.
and then I think what would happen, to Steve's point, is as the meeting went on, your totals would add up. So at the end of the meeting, you would have that exact question asked with the amount that was talked about previous.
You
Is
find
that
a
how you?
warrant, you find a warrant article has to add to the total
Right.
of everything.
Right, we've been,
But if it's adjusted down,
You can, yeah.
you could get it down, which eventually, that last article may not be needed, which would get back to Steve's point. If everything was voted down at the, I mean, I think that's the only way, you couldn't do an up, you could only do it down. Which is, it's hard.
Yeah.
if I may, just, because I'm gonna keep throwing these out, because I really would like to see we not beat this to death till 11:45 tonight.
Oh, I don't plan to.
Okay. Economic development, I wanna talk about low-hanging fruit. $7,000 is programmed for economic development this year. My position on that, and most people know I've wanted more substance behind the Raymond Revitalization Committee, because But that's not where the money's going, don't get me wrong. That's now wrapped into this package with community development and some of it's GP-COG and some of it's Sevago Technics, but it's $7,000 for economic development. I think most of you have been up and down the 302 corridor lately. Economic development in the town of Raymond right now is Kevin Gagnon, Mark Acousti, David Greep, Mike Myers, the Chipmans, the Mayers, the Manchesters, Michoud and Coppersmith. You can go on, Jessica Fay, Randy Moses, Glenn Geisel, Eric Rydell, Bill Dowling. That's our economic development driver. It's not being driven by hashed over census data that's collected by someone that we hire to give us census data and some marketing through the door retail data. It's done by it's being done. It's not by the efforts of us putting $7,000 into it. It's being done by the people and residents of this town who have a commitment to this town. It's the private sector doing what the private sector does best. So again, I take offense when it said you're balancing this budget on the back of our employees. I'm sorry. There's plenty of places here where this town's been spending money, and we spend money in some really good places. And that's what we need to continue to remind ourselves. We want to spend the money in good places. We want to be surgical. We don't want to be sledgehammered. And I do caution everyone, just so you know the politics of a town meeting. It all depends. We could come up with a $5 million increase. If you want to send this to town meeting, it's who shows up. That's who it is. We've had 75 people show up recently. When we used to have the school budget, we'd have 200 to 300. Now, if you want to go with, you have to do an LD1 override, whether it's exceed it for 1 year or increase it infinitum forever, it's going to come down to June 4th, and we're all going to walk into a room, and whoever thinks the best proposal on the table is, that's the one that brings out their people to get out the vote, who comes there, the concerned citizens who walk in their door on their own who haven't heard any of this will then hear it that day at the meeting, and it's going to be a long meeting. And that's why we're trying to do this homework here, so our town meeting doesn't go Tuesday night and Wednesday night and Thursday night. And if we were truly holding to our philosophical beliefs, we'd be saying, why not put it all out to referendum? Put the whole budget. We always want the most input, right, from the citizens in the town. We don't want special interests to come in and run our town meeting. So if you really want to get the public's input, put it in a referendum for June 11th, would it be? June 11th. Do you want to exceed? Here's some proposals. What do you think? But to do line items at a town meeting, again, that's what we're supposed to be doing that we haven't done. That's why our roads are where they are. That's why, maybe I stand corrected, we don't need so much money for CIP in the equipment line. I've been thinking, geez, we've been buying surplus junk all these years, or good stuff that we got buy-in. Here's an opportunity to buy some good stuff and get it in the structure.
I don't really know where to begin with that, but I'll just say that, to keep it quick, that $7,000 is a very, very small amount of money to spend on economic development. When you look at what our neighbors are spending and some of the successes that they're having, we're trying to baby step in. We have a volunteer committee who is, I think, doing a great job of getting some valuable projects moving. The first of which was the brochure, the business brochure, the community brochure. So, yeah, you spend $7,000, you gather some data, you get some information, you use that data and information for good community planning. Now, the alternative you could do, as Mr. Levitt says, you could just let it kind of organically go, and with all due respect to all the wonderful development that we've had, and I think we have had some wonderful development in the past and continuing, that's certainly a viable model. But if you wanted to try to look at helping to direct and plan and have some sort of a cohesive plan, have something that was other than, just a whatever happens via the private sector, then that's why you would have economic development money. $7,000 is a very small amount of money to do economic development work.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
That brochure that was produced last summer was, it was great. It was a nice gesture, and the problem I have with that brochure is not the cost of it. We left out two of the biggest employers in this town, Sabre Yachts and Dielectric, were not even mentioned in that brochure. Now, is this committee you know, actively, you know, talking to these two companies, these two major companies, these two major taxpayers in this town? Or is it, were they forgotten? I mean, it's a great brochure, but our two biggest employers are not in that brochure.
I think it was more of a tourism brochure, wasn't it, Brian, if I remember it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
more about tourism.
But, I mean, you name every business, Joe, and, I mean, you would have been a little upset if community pharmacy wouldn't have been mentioned,
Yeah, that's
right?
why I'm not hearing.
It would have been free advertisement, right?
This was a tourism brochure.
I think it
not-
was all
not
about
tourism.
It doesn't
But-
matter.
But to go to your point, if we were to spend some money on economic development, that's exactly the sort of thing you'd do, would be to consult with your major industries and see what kind of land use changes, other changes would be beneficial and helpful to them in expanding their businesses. That's the kind of thing you'd do. Or you could just wait and see what happens, as has been suggested.
But I mean, those two companies donate to our Community Action Fund.
Yeah.
And they do
Yeah,
very generously.
yeah.
And I don't want this community to forget, because one of the issues we keep going back to are the bonds. You wanna talk about little steps or baby steps, I don't consider the extension of the water line on 302 and the repaving and the beautification of Route 302 to have been small baby steps for economic development in this town. Those were not small baby steps. We did make one major backward step when we committed money to CHIPCO, which ended up to be a disaster. One of the last times we tried to do an economic development program using less than adequate means of making sure and protecting this community. But I defy anyone, and I voted for both the beautification of 302 and the overlay and the water line. And a lot of people questioned the water line when I made that vote. But those votes were economic development votes.
Yeah.
Those weren't giving money to GP Cog, and the last product they sent out, I want you all to get a copy of that and see it. It's rehashed census data with some retail information.
Yeah.
That's not where we should be spending $7,000. And it goes beyond, it's not the Raymond Revitalization Committee. They're doing a good job. They're not getting this money. It's going-
Now you're going back
It's
10
go-
years and you're looking at this in a revisionist way. I feel I need to say that you were not a leader in those initiatives, and
I said I voted for them.
you voted for them. I don't remember you being particularly supportive. They were tremendous economic development initiatives for the town.
All right, let's get back to the budget.
I voted with my vote.
Okay, let's get back to the budget. Why don't we do this? Take alternative 2, and let's go line by line down that list and see if we support it. Does that work?
Joe, can I ask one quick question of the Public Works? On the new negotiated P and K contract, I'm hearing that with the $900,000, we may be an all right year this year, but next year may be a real tough year for us. Is there any way that they would be willing to take that 5% and spread it out? So in other words, they'd have a $4,400 increase next year, and then in 2015-16, another $4,400 increase?
Question to be asked, and then I can't answer.
Okay, because I'm just saying, take that, rather than have the whole 5% hit next year, could we spread it out a little?
Spread it out over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I'm just worried. That's
I
why I
can
just,
ask the question.
okay, thanks.
But I mean, for this year, we know we're gonna be saving $5,000.
Right, but I just don't want it all hit next year.
Okay.
All right.
So, first one is selectman stipend. I assume we can all agree on that one. There's a reduction of $2,400.
Well, there's only 2 people who can agree to that.
Well,
Actually, there's 3, but only 2 seem to have agreed.
2 agree to it.
Okay.
Okay. Admin supply reduction, $200, no issues. Travel and training, a reduction, $200. Everyone okay? If you have an objection, speak up.
What if you think it could go down further? Or
Let's get
I'll see
through
where
this.
you're going with
Yeah.
this, and then we'll,
Yeah. Assessing, another 100. Assessing legal, 100. Health and dental, we know is going down.
And that's because, and I know there was discussion, but people should know that that's not part of the $500 or any of the deductible. That's
No.
because I think we've got revised numbers.
We do. That's due to a recalculation.
Yeah.
Town hall equipment, 200, repairs, 500, community development legal, 3,000. Community development supplies, 100, The snow removal, we know, the workers' comp, yep.
And there's two questions, the snow removal and pine tree waste, because I think that comes, does that come up later?
Yep.
The curbside,
Yeah.
trash
Yeah,
recycling?
that's further down.
That, I don't wanna gloss over those, and I would like to ask Nate. When you talk to P and K and when you talk to Pine Tree, I noticed when you talked to Pine Tree, they said if we provided some operational help, and I guess that was never defined. And I guess your negotiations with P and K, it was 0 and then 5,000 and 0. So does that include any givebacks on our, because I'll tell you, for $5,000, I wish they were doing all the roads. I'd give them the
That's
5,000.
changing nothing in the contract with the plowing. As far as the Pine Tree trash contract, Don did the negotiation with Pine Tree on the trash contract. I believe it was Don.
What's gonna happen with Pine Tree, if you accept that, is we're gonna have to talk to them about changes in service on some roads that are difficult for them to service, that they end up with trucks off the road and problems. We have some pretty poor private roads that we provide service to, so you're gonna have a negotiation with them over that.
So Don, would this be a centralized collection point then, for those roads?
That's how we deal with those, is go with the centralized collection points, and with the exception of one, which I think is now resolved, because the person that was concerned over it has moved, but we have no complaints, and I think most people find the centralized collection point to be more convenient, actually.
yeah.
But we'd probably be looking at a centralized collection point on a road or two. That's exactly what we'd be doing.
Is there I don't wanna get off track, but is there an opportunity for more of those? Could that 7,200 become,
No, I did explore that with them. They're very reluctant to do this. They've done this as basically a good faith gesture to the town, because they find us to be a good town to work with, and we've been helpful to them, and we've, I'll leave it at that. I think there was a memo that basically alluded to that, but he didn't want me to make a big public statement, because they're not doing that anywhere else.
Okay.
He agreed to do that because I asked him to do it.
Steve?
Back to the workman's comp, that board just voted an increase, so is that a true number, minus 2,000?
Yeah, that was the latest from our insurance agent, I assume.
That's what it looks like
Right.
it's going to be.
Is that through a better mod rating, or is that?
We have a great model.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
It's under one, Nancy?
Yeah, 7,500.
Oh,
Peter?
excellent.
A question for Don. Have the private roads that you were talking about all been notified?
None have been notified, because
None.
we haven't actually identified him yet. I have an idea where he's going with it, but this is one of those things where we're gonna have to sit down and negotiate.
Steve?
Well, and answer one of Brian's question, I actually worked with the town and got the centralized on disposal on our road, and I kept asked the same question earlier in this process, is there an opportunity there? And the problem is, it's kind of there's a balance between the lower cost of them picking up and the higher incidence of people finding those dumpsters and dumping inappropriate stuff in them. So I think it's a balance of where you can find the correct location to site those, so you don't get the.
That is very important. If you put them in a place where people see them, it's a problem.
Yep.
Can't you lock them?
Then,
That becomes a real issue.
Yeah, yeah, they just dump on top of them then.
we did have an issue with one dumpster, but I think we've got that one under control now.
All right, Public Works, District 1, $500. Everyone okay with that? Building maintenance, 400. Equipment maintenance, 1,000. Recycling Committee, $500.
The only reason why I'd object to that is that's a pretty minuscule.
Well, I mean, their entire
Fee.
budget, I think, is 1,200,
Yeah.
if I remember. I don't know how often they even meet anymore.
Like, yeah.
When I saw that, my gut tells me that we've been into our recycling program now for a few years, and they have less need because the public has become more educated on the single sort. It's probably easier than it would have been a few years ago to do that, so.
I don't even know how much they've expended this year. I can't remember.
Nancy?
Very
Do we
little.
still need that committee?
Well,
Yeah.
at some point in the future, our contract with Pine Tree is gonna expire, and there's gonna have to be some soul searching at that point, depending on the numbers on curbside pickup and trash and recycling. We're gonna be at this again. Our plan was to stabilize it, as we've tried with many programs in this town to stabilize the mill rate, stabilize the spending, stay on fiscal discipline track. That was one of those efforts, but that too will expire and we'll be back at it. Just a caution.
All right, the curbside recycling, is the 7280 acceptable, Mike?
Just gonna throw out a comment on that, and for folks who may not know, and I'll put Nate and his crew on the spot here. One of the reasons I think that Pine Tree is willing to do this is because when they get stuck, like they did a couple times last week, our trucks go down first and try to get them out.
Right.
If they called a wrecker, anytime they called a wrecker, it would be thousands of dollars to them, which they would lose on this contract. So the fact that Don was able to negotiate this is in part because of the way we treat them, because we have so many private roads. If you were in Wyndham, Wyndham's Public Works is not going down and hooking onto that trash truck when it gets stuck on the roads. So I just think that that's when Don says they're willing to work with us, that's one of the reasons why. My gut will tell me that they'll come back with the road that Nate was on a couple times last week, trying to pull that truck out. It's probably one of the roads that will happen, so I just wanted to point that out, that I think that's one of the reasons that's willingness is there to renegotiate.
And I guess my hesitation on this would be the same as our negotiation with Gray, is that not knowing the specifics, not knowing where those operational changes are gonna happen, in what parts, what communities, what neighborhoods are gonna be affected. I mean, you may have that answer. I just don't have, we're here to protect the public's interest, and the part of the public's interest would be, what backyard is that dumpster gonna go in? And that was one of the issues we had with the folks down on Deep Cove Shores, where that was set. And when we talk about things that were found, like dead dogs, I mean, there are some issues. I guess without having that, I'd be unwilling to say, let's take that deal without having more knowledge of the deal. It's similar to Gray.
In talking to the operations manager from Pine Tree Waste, one of the roads is Thomas Pond Terrace Road, and I think we're gonna lose that no matter what. That's been our biggest problem, getting in and out of that road. It's a long road, it's a lot of stops. The problem with that road is where you put the dumpsters. There's two other roads. Spring Valley Road was one of them that they're looking at, and I think the other one was down here on 85 where they plucked the truck out of the woods. The name's slipping there at the moment.
Because they're on Dryad Woods.
Dryer Edge Wood, no. I'm sorry, I can't think of
That's
it.
a dumpster, yeah, that's set there, yeah. Not
That's-
River Road.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Just checking.
But the problem with most of them is where do you put the dumpsters? We've got, the one on Deep Cove, I think we've pretty much curbed the problem down there.
Didn't we agree in the contract on the width and the maintenance of the road?
On some of them, Thomas Pond Terrace was the biggest problem with Thomas Pond Terrace was the amount of stops down there. That's why we didn't originally do it. And a place to locate the dumpster has been the biggest problem. But that has been their biggest cost center, trying to get in and out of that road.
Yeah.
I just have to ask this question, because as a private business owner, what I just heard really scares me. Does the town of Raymond's insurance cover you for pulling a trash truck out?
We don't actually hook onto the truck and pull them out. We do what we can to get them out. We'll take them down sand, help them shovel.
Okay,
We took
okay.
the backhoe down
Sorry.
once and
Okay,
cuffed it.
so I just-
No.
I scared you, sorry.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the last one we had last week, we had to sand the road to get the tow truck in.
Okay,
They had to
alright.
bring a tow truck in for that, but that's the kind of stuff that, they didn't do in Wyndham, and I think there was an added $2,000 charge onto that
Okay, nice.
recovery.
Do most people want to accept the 7280?
Yep, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Can I make another comment, please,
Yeah.
on the curbside trash?
Yeah.
At some point, I think, on some of those private roads like Thomas Pond Terrace, you know, you're gonna have to get a smaller truck in there. Possibly another private, Joe Valachi offered that service to Raymond residents on certain roads for, I know he was advertising it, so. If they can't get the big truck in there, they you know, they've got a contract, and
But it's written in the contract, I'm pretty
Yeah, that
sure.
we could
That talked
negotiate.
about the width of the road,
Yeah.
how much area they needed to turn around. That's all in the contract.
That is correct, yeah, that is in the contract. And we did explore the small truck
Yeah, I mean-
in this original contract, and it's a cost. It's all about money. They felt that to put the little truck into play was gonna cost them more money.
Well, the company we used to have when I lived off Deep Cove, they used to have a smaller truck with a dumpster on the back. And they had a guy go around on these small roads and throw the trash in the dumpster and then meet up with the big truck, and the big truck would take the dumpster off and dump it in the bigger truck. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
not
we-
rocket science.
We got, the single biggest complaint we got with BBI contract was that truck, because the trash blowing out of the back of it.
Right.
And it's not a good solution.
Well, it is, if
That
you
wasn't
got,
a good
if you
solution.
put a cover on it, I mean.
Well,
Well,
that
was-
particular was not a good solution, and what happened is, because we can have anything we want in terms of trash service, anything we want if we're willing to pay for it. What we want is the least expensive service. So if we tell them and insist that they use a small truck on these roads, they'll do it and price it.
I think we're paying enough.
But is there a
now.
definition for private roads?
All right. MWAC reduction, 1550, everyone okay with that?
That's structural. That's
just
reduction.
debt service reduction, right?
I don't know what that
Uh,
is.
No, I think it's tipping. It's usually
Usage.
tipping. Yeah, we're just not.
Cemetery repairs, everyone okay?
Aren't we spending money to create a new cemetery? Is that what this is for?
That's-
It was last year.
Yeah.
We did
been
that.
spent.
We
Okay.
plotted that.
That
We
was the
did
plotting
last
last year. We did it all at once. Park materials, equipment, 1,000. Everyone okay? All right, now we get into the CIPs here. Into the CIPs. And that totals $80,000. I mean, does anyone have any interest in any of these CIP reductions? Or are we saying we're gonna use some of the proceeds?
I think that's what we're talking about, is using
Yeah.
the proceeds there, because I mean, the one is the paving, I mean,
Right.
that's gutting what we want, what we said we wanted to do, so I mean, you know.
So no one's in favor of any of these CIP reductions? Is that what I'm hearing?
The only thing I would say is that the municipal facilities, I'd like to hear a little bit more about it. If town management thinks that there can be a reduction of $10,000, I'd be interested in hearing, you know, where they think that savings can come from.
Well, I'm not gonna speak for Don, but I'm thinking, they put this out there for us to review. I don't think they're in favor of it, so to speak, but I think it's more, here's $80,000.
Right, okay.
Nathan?
I don't have the schedule with me, but there is a schedule for the CIP for that building maintenance account. This year, we're doing the mold abatement at the town office and putting some dehumidifiers. The coming year, we're looking at new fuel pumps down at District 2, the Public Works Garage, and it goes out, I think, 5 years.
Okay.
There's some money carried from year to year, because we don't expend it every year. I think that was the cut that we did on the 10,000, or the reduction was the 10,000 was,
Was it carry forward?
it was part of a carry forward for unknown. We don't know what the fuel pump's gonna cost us going forward. We've got a number on the mold abatement. There's other things that could be done that weren't gonna get done.
I mean, honestly, could you live without it?
Yeah, I guess you could, but, we've been putting off maintenance on, especially the town office for years, and we've been trying to keep up with it.
Charlie?
And just to, again, reiterate that it's hard to say, cut these CIPs without knowing what we're putting back in place. That's,
I think you have the CIP list, and this pretty much just takes off the
no,
list.
I mean, as far as funding, the long-term funding goal for CIP and how that's gonna be funded. I mean, to say I agree to this, I actually said cut more out of these two particular CIPs, except that I was filling it back in with bond money.
Bonding, yeah.
So to say, I mean, if we're not in agreement on how we wanna structure the CIP through a bond, it's hard to say, well, let's take what Kathy and Bruce said and forget about it and cut them 25,000. I couldn't do that. Or Nate said, here's what I need, and we go, yeah, okay, just without knowing, what's our plan? That was, I think, where we started.
I mean, that's why I think they gave you that whole CIP plan, somewhere. So,
Yeah, but we're talking
what's
just this
different?
fiscal.
Why
fiscal year.
wouldn't you just pay cash for this CIP this year? Why wouldn't you take part of that 900,000 and pay this $80,000 in cash?
Because you,
Why
why?
would you wanna go bond it?
Because bonding makes sure it gets done, Joe.
Well,
It makes, it
But-
guarantees it's going to be done, and that revenue coming in is dedicated revenue to specific needs, very
But-
specific, not bleeding into the undesignated fund balance or,
but putting it in and saying it's for this purpose, it's for the CIP, that should guarantee it gets done.
but it hasn't been in the past.
No.
Well, then
It hasn't.
then designated as part of, the income, designated specifically to that.
Right.
But
That
it hasn't
way-
been.
Huh?
The way we've run our CIP over the last 10 years,
Well, that's what I'm
Ralph,
saying, you
is
take it out
that-
of the CIP and, you take those funds and you designate it
Right.
to the task. Instead of saying to the CIP, you take that item out of the CIP, put it to a designated task, take that money, now designate it to that task. You've
Yeah.
done,
Right.
that's fine.
You have to
So
be
it's no-
specific in your
So what you're
warrant
doing
article.
is, what you're doing is, in effect, you're reducing the CIP, but you're adding another line, which is that task.
Right.
And then
Right, but-
you're gonna take that income of that and apply it against
But
that.
what the bond does is it commits that spending in a 3-year period, and we pay it off in 10 years, pretty much neutral, without any,
Well, I don't think,
doing this again
Yeah,
next
but
year
he's-
and the year
yeah,
after.
but he's not arguing that point, he's arguing the point of this 80,000 here.
Right.
He's not arguing the hundred and, the $1 million, he's arguing the 80,000 here.
The-
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand, but then
Yeah.
why wouldn't you go greater? In order to get us closer to an LD1 compliant budget, why not take more of those proceeds and reduce that CIP more? These requests, go bigger. Because if
can.
you're gonna backfill it with the committing that to a designated CIP, then backfill it with that 900,000. And then we know it's being spent for that, and it's not hanging out there to be depleted
Well,
over the next
I mean,
5 or 6 years.
It's up to the select board to
Yeah.
make those decisions on whether or not you're gonna deplete that $900,000. That's the truth of the matter.
And
So,
that's-
so if you think it's just gonna be frivolously thrown away, then that's gonna be the.
Not frivolously, Joe, but
Right.
we did kick the can down the road for many years, the select board, many years, and so hasn't budget finance. And that's where this community, I think, is expecting us to be a lot more bold and a lot more specific.
I'm
and-
not sure we kicked the can down the road, though.
Well,
We haven't had an increase in 7
The
years.
roads, Joe, the
Well,
roads.
I mean, we have increased the road budget from 180,000 to 240,000. I'm saying we make it 500,000.
But that's just maintenance alone. That was
Right.
just the maintenance. We didn't do anything about, we did a $1 million bond.
Right.
And that we're still paying for. And
Right.
that was long gone. That work is long gone, because we didn't keep up with it. We didn't commit to it. And
Well,
this
because
is
we didn't put
by
the money in-
bonding it and putting it in this package, we're committing to it because we can't not commit to it. We have to.
But
In order to be LD1 compliant, we slowly increase that maintenance line from 180,000 to 240. I always said we should go higher.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
So I
I
don't say
think
it's
we have an
frivolous. You
oppor-
tried, but it didn't,
we have an opportunity now to really do something about
yeah,
it.
I agree.
Steve?
My concern with doing what you're saying is, in fact, what this alternative 2 does, which I really have heartburn over. It's almost another undesignated fund balancing of the budget. If you take $80,000 out of the sale of the property to take these items out of the budget, another $80,000 is gonna come back in other items. To say, and you can say, now we're LD1 compliant, but in fact, we got there by taking money from the sale of the property to balance the budget. Where I think I would like to see us get as close as we can without tapping into that, the sale of the property to balance the budget. So I really do think that the CIP paving maybe needs to be decided first or on a sideline somehow, and then look at, mixing it in with all these other budget items is making it somewhat confusing and not straightforward.
Okay, well, why don't we come back to this then? can we eliminate this bond payment, this $20,000?
Yeah,
I
'cause you
would
can
say
structure
that-
you can
that was
structure
the
the bond
option.
so you'll
Okay,
run it
so
out.
we're gonna eliminate that one. Let's go down. Do we only see a $5,000 increase in the excise tax this year? Are we ever gonna get back to where we were 5 years ago? I mean, we were at 800,000, now we're down to, with that 5,000, we're at 725.
I'm not gonna help you next year. I'm just not helping you next year.
I got a new car on order.
This year or next year though?
This year, it should be in next month.
See, you're not helping either.
There you
I
go.
thought-
Economy's looking up. Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that we could, and Nancy disagreed with me, and, but I thought that we could adjust it somewhat more.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that.
So what are you saying? Take that up?
Frankly, I think things to me are turning around, people are starting, as I drive up and down Turnpike every day, I'm seeing more temporary plates, you know, which is a good sign. So,
That's, if you brought it up, like, say, $5,000, that's basically 5 cars,
right,
or a couple of cars and the,
I mean, well, I'm willing to go to $10,000 on this thing, because I think things are starting to, there's a little more confidence out there. People okay with that? All right.
Go higher if you want.
No, because I don't want to be unrealistic. Yeah, so. All right, we know the tower lease is done, we know the miscellaneous revenue is gone. We'll wait on that 106,000. Are we all accepting the Luther Gullick money for doing the fields? That's what we did
What's
last
the balance on that?
It's,
It's like 27,000.
Oh, so we got a number of years it could be
Oh, yeah.
used for, okay,
oh yeah, and then
I think that's
remember,
great.
it continues to increase,
yeah.
so.
What? What's the 106,000?
That is taking money from the sale,
From the 900,000.
from the
Okay,
900,000
piece of
and putting it back in to get down to LD1 compliance.
Okay.
One potential addition.
Yeah.
Which is, I've never, it came through the emails, with code enforcement. Chris said that actually if, this is more, a little bit more long-term, but putting in an electrical permit requirement in the town of Raymond, which I fully support. You were coming up with numbers along $8,000. There's potential, and I don't know what that's gonna take to actually get a requirement for, to have electrical permits.
That has to go back in front of the select board.
But there's a potential revenue source and a huge safety issue.
When do we turn that down, Chris? Back in the fall?
Yes.
So you gotta wait until after July to bring it back up.
Yeah.
So,
Unless you rescind the vote.
unless you move to reconsider, yeah.
No, you can't reconsider, it's closed, you have to rescind it.
No,
It can only be reconsidered in the same meeting. You have to rescind the vote.
no, that's not true. You can reconsider at any time
As long as a member of the,
on the prevailing side.
prevailing side.
What's the meeting, well.
if you elected to reconsider and bring it back up, you could enact that as an amendment to the fee schedule at that meeting, correct?
Right.
And I tend to agree with Mr. Linay on that one.
Okay. You might wanna make a note to bring it up on the next
Okay.
agenda. All right, how about, let's do the library and the Raymond Waterways. Charlie suggested $2,500 increases for each one. How do people feel about this?
I think it's a good compromise, and the reason why is I think with the library, first of all, I honor Steve's idea of having payment, but I think there's something about a public library, and maybe it's more emotional than anything else, it's the concept that it's totally free, and I think anything that limits or reduces the potential for participation in the library is not a good thing, so, I mean, given the budgets, then I would think that the $2,500 is a good compromise, and I would say the same thing for the RWPA.
Peter?
I would say the 2,500 for the library, because that benefits, I think, a multitude of people, many, many more. And I would not grant the increase to the waterways.
Because,
because I think we wanna save money, and I think the benefit of that is less than the library.
The only comment I'll make on that is that if milfoil really gets away from us, we've got half of our, if I remember correctly, about half of our grand list is waterfront property.
58%.
58? Holy moly. Yeah, so, you know, if you take a hit on that, then someone,
Well,
we're all gonna take the hit on it, so.
It's a one-year hit, and, right now they tell me, other than Sebago, there's no milfoil in the other lakes.
Right now.
True. Well, the issue, the other issue is, from a structural standpoint, it's an invisible change, because it's under the TIF.
Right.
Which means you're not gonna see it budget-wise. So it's more of a philosophical issue. If
Right.
you're gonna, you know, if you're doing it to one, do you do it to both? So it's not, you know, from.
The library's not under the TIF though.
No, the library is
Just
not under the TIF.
RWPA is.
Right, but RWPA is, so it's not gonna do anything on you being LD1 compliant or, any, you know, in that metrics there.
Right.
So it's more of a, you know, it's more of a philosophical issue of, you know, are we, you know, we taking a stance, I mean, what they asked for was, you know, perceived as too much, so we, you know, we wanna make that change there.
Bob?
Two things I'd like to consider is that our highest taxpayers come from the coastal community along our waterways. And secondly, that they're looking to add a second vessel to their program, so they're gonna have new increased costs. And I think that second vessel would be beneficial to keep our waters clean.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the request was only for a one-year increase. It was for $5,000 for this year, and for milfoil. And to be honest with you, I am not convinced, and we've had this discussion about when we went to the monitors before on Crescent Lake, which I look over, and I can see the boats all being checked on the Raymond side, and the boats on the Casco side of Crescent Lake aren't checked. So until we have a more comprehensive plan on milfoil, we know there's 6 or 7 other sites on Sebago Lake that Standish hasn't bought into a program yet, maybe Sebago hasn't bought into a program that my thought really about the $2,500 is not just a one-year plan, and whether it goes to Raymond Waterways or it goes to Public Works. The biggest debate I've seen come up lately is about putting that town dock outside of the Veterans Memorial Park. And regardless of where you stand on that, the vital information that came from all of that study was that we've got some terrible erosion going on. And for those people who are concerned about lakefront property and milfoil, maybe our focus has gone this way for docks and trying to do our bit for milfoil when it really needs a global community to be committed to it, and trying to get some more activity going into real bricks and mortar, which to me is that erosion problem. When I saw those pictures, it had the same impact on me in your presentation, or on the Raymond Revitalization Committee presentation about the erosion in that spot, as it did looking at the Kalamazoo River and the tar sands. It's like, this is something that, regardless of where we stand politically or socially on all these other issues, there's some work still to be done if we're really looking at protecting the waterfront. So,
The town has
again,
partnered on many occasions with the Raymond Waterways on erosion projects, erosion prevention projects, improvement projects. So that's something that's ongoing and something that Public Works is involved with. There's actually an article that enables us to go off of the right-of-way to do that as a part of the town meeting warrant. The other thing I would like to tell you, this is just from my experience, and I say it every year, just something to consider, and I understand the magnitude of the increase for the library. I get that on a percent basis. But if you look at it on a raw dollar basis, if we had a public library, what it would cost us to have a public library, to fund a public library, would far, far exceed this request. We don't have a public library. My interest many years ago was to try to work toward that goal. I know the library folks are trying to broaden and expand and to improve their offerings. They're trying to bring the library forward. And so I think insofar as we can help, if it's $2,500, then that's great. If it's something else, then that's great. But I think to support the library is integral to the social and cultural life of the community. And I've heard this idea of a fee before. Many years ago, the idea was, well, we charge for tie-ups on the harbor, we should charge a fee to use the library. I don't think that's really the way to go, though, because of what Brian said, and I think we want to encourage people to use the library, we want to encourage people to broaden themselves, and I can only speak for myself personally, but I'm a big library supporter.
All right, so are we in agreement on 2,500 for the library? Okay, how about 2,500 for Raymond Waterways? All set on that? Okay.
Can I just ask for, are we all set on that? I mean,
I'm just looking at nodding
Yeah.
heads. And it looked like the more for
okay,
me.
that's,
I vote no, go
yeah.
ahead.
I vote no.
Okay.
Yeah, I just,
We're not into, we're not into a voting meeting anyway.
right,
No,
right, but
right.
just
Consensus.
consensus.
I mean, we're trying to, essentially, the select board has got to then take all this back and.
Right.
and
You'll do your vote, we'll do our
please this
vote.
and then-
Yeah.
All right, so where are we on the wage increase and the benefit package increase? I mean,
1% and 500 deductible sounds good to me. That's mine.
Okay.
Bill?
Yep.
Hang on. Employees want to speak.
If you increase the deductible and you give a 1%, you're reducing 90% of our staff's pay. And it's the 90% that probably can afford it the least. If you make $30,000 a year working for this town, you get an increase of $300. And if you gotta go to the doctor 4 or 5 times in the course of a year, you pay $500 if we change this.
Wow.
And so it's a $200 reduction with, plus the whole tax change, so,
Well,
but it's still a reduction.
You're looking
in-
at co-pays, you don't hit a deductible until you have, service beyond your normal health care. For example, lab work, emergency room visits, surgeries, that's when you hit your deductible.
I don't think on our plan, after we changed it the last time, that's not our plan.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think so.
It is, you have a $20 office visit deductible, and then you pay for whatever the insurance company doesn't pay for your lab work or anything else.
What do
That's
they,
when you-
what's a copay on prescriptions, Joe? Do you know?
It's $10 generic, $30 for brand name? No?
But
We
that,
have office co-pays with this.
You don't?
You pay the whole thing
Oh, okay.
unless it's preventative.
Which was a big change for our employees. There are employees here who cannot afford, and that's why we had the reimbursement, and to have the reimbursement happen quickly.
Okay.
Because we have employees who cannot afford their prescriptions. We have employees who, family plan employees that can't afford the second $3,000, so don't go to the doctor.
So you went to a totally 100% deductible plan is what you went to, not a copay, not a, okay.
Correct.
I didn't realize that, I thought you were in a copay plan, I'm sorry.
And we did this within the last 6 years, which was a reduction in pay
Right.
to some people, especially folks who have a tough year. And so
Yeah,
I'm not in favor of,
So that gives you a whole different perspective now, because if you're on a 100% deductible plan, you're paying for everything. That means prescriptions, everything that comes up, you're paying for. And this just reimburses you.
correct.
Right, up to
Well-
$3,000.
I'd like to take it on the perspective of a resident, that in fact, increasing my taxes by giving out raises is reducing my income. So whose income is going to be reduced? I think we need to strike a balance here.
But see, Steve, you could argue that and say, I don't have kids in school anymore, why am I paying the school budget? I mean, that's what it
No,
comes down to.
what I'm saying is, in fact, actually, if we increase this budget, which ends up in a mill rate increase, my taxes go up, my income goes down. So, there's a balance here, so let's consider the residents of Raymond as well. We're looking at them to all take income reductions as well.
So when most of our citizens live in town, then you just hit them twice. Most of our employees live in town, so you hit them twice.
Yeah.
And then if you were to go to a local business, and let's say the local business adjusted cost year to year, you as a public employee, because we were trying to save the residents some money, I'm just trying to theoretically understand this, would be flat funded, but if we went to a local business that had an increased cost, we'd have to pay the increased cost for goods and services. You don't increase your costs year to year,
No,
so they stay
because
flat forever?
the market controls it. I don't have the ability to do a
I'm
mill
just saying,
rate.
the reason that we look at the CPIU, Northeast Region, is because the cost of goods and services,
Well,
commodities increases year to year.
in Boston.
And if you,
That's
pardon me?
what, the statistics
That's
you're
the
using is in
closest one,
Boston.
we determined after debate, that was the closest one. So that tells you
Well, my
what the
pricing
cost of
is,
goods and services.
my pricing is not set by Boston. Okay, my pricing is set by the local market. Yes, I will charge what I can, but if in fact, prices are not going up, my competitors are not raising prices, I don't raise price, I can't. In fact, I took a 20% increase in cider costs this year, but I did not pass on an increase. That's 20% less that I'm taking in, that I've got. That's the free market. I just want everyone to think about, you're asking the residents of this town to pay more. So, yes, I understand with employees and everything else, but everyone is gonna be
But Steve, we
potentially
could-
getting less money.
We could also lessen the services we provide in order to keep the budget flat.
Well,
We could say,
thank you.
we're not gonna pave the roads, we're
I'm-
not gonna plow the roads, we're not gonna.
Joe,
pick up
I'm
the
so glad
trash.
you brought that up, because I have a business
Yeah.
in a town which has been determined as not comparable, but I get the same goods and services in Casco for far less money.
They pick up your trash?
Actually, I pay trash man $40 a month, which I'm happy to do, and he picks up all my trash. So my point is, just think about, when we're doing this, please keep the residents of Raymond in mind as well.
Another way to look at it is to say, the $48,000 is a placeholder to begin with.
Exactly.
We're just putting that number in there, so let's forget we've talked about changing the plan. But if we were to say that we're reducing the $3,000, paying $3,000 deductible, that we're paying $2,500, it would have the same $8,000 reduction in what is a placeholder number anyway, because it's not, and the only reason why, because we talked about this at the 5-hour marathon, was that Nancy said we had to put it in. And then I don't know if we paid for legal opinions to get a legal opinion, and Bernstein and Shaw came back and said, oh, that would be terrible for your bonding. Standard & Poor's and Moody's would be all upset if you don't fund your unfunded liability. And then, no offense, Joe, but then we say, oh, but let's take a couple $100,000 out of our undesignated fund balance, which is an auditable number, it's a real number. So the 48,000 is a placeholder. We could, if we wanted to, based on experience, I don't know, have we hit that? We don't know. We don't know where we'll be next year for hitting that 48,000.
We never will know in advance. but
Right.
we used 33,000 last year.
33, so,
Compromise, is it the first 500 or the last 500?
It would have to be the first 500,
Why?
because that's the way these insurance plans are set up.
The reimbursement.
Are you reimbursing directly from the town, or do you go through a
Directly.
third-party administrator?
Directly.
I would say once again, look at what's offered other places, be cognizant of that. The employees of the town have given already.
well, if I may, that's premature. We have a compensation study committee out there. They're doing their work. I've seen a lot of their data. I've seen that they've said, it's just not there yet. We can't say this is what other towns, comparable towns, they're still debating, should we take out this town? And Brian has a model, and Dennis Morse has a model, so I don't think it's appropriate for us at this point to say, let's compare ourselves to other towns. I think we compare ourselves to Raymond. We don't compare ourselves to $38 million school systems. We compare ourselves to Raymond and say, what's fair to an employees and
I have heartburn if we do both.
I do too.
I'd say,
That's too much.
one of, from what I'm hearing, my druthers would be 1% and keep the deductible where it is.
That would be the preference of the
That
employees
would
as
be,
well.
that would be my suggestion.
we'll hear from one or two.
Okay,
Kathy Goslin, I'm the Deputy Chief Fire Rescue Company. I want to talk about the call company members. You know, we have 35 members on our call company. And if you want to talk about overpaid, that's not true. An EMT basic, this is a licensed EMT, or a firefighter one, certified firefighter, makes $9.46 an hour. And they get absolutely no benefits. $9.46. They're asked to go into burning buildings. They're asked to respond to car crashes on Route 302 when you have traffic going by your backside at 50 miles an hour. You get puked on, and a lot of other body functions that you shouldn't have to see. We respond to homes that are not in the safest response areas. We do this. The average call company pay rate is $11.38 an hour. We've talked a lot tonight about, well, everybody got a wage every year for the past 6 years. Well, the fire department for 2 years opted not to do that, and we took stipends and we took weekend differential pay away from members. So we've actually decreased their members. Now, my proposal would be a little different. I'd say, okay, look at management, and I'm including myself in that, and say, don't give them the raise, but don't forget the little guys. I mean, when you're making $9.46 an hour, and the other towns are making $11 an hour, that's huge. Okay? Thanks.
Sure, go ahead.
But did you have a question?
I have a question for Nancy, but go ahead.
I'd like to address something on the full-time side of things, and we know our full-timers are union employees. These folks got a 2% raise the last time around last year, which we did include. The year before that, we did not have any raises for our full-time employees. In fact, they have gone 3 years without wage increases and taken the cut in the insurance. And as was said, I think Dawn said it, there are some employees that won't go to the doctors because they can't afford the out-of-pocket. Is this something that you really want to take from your employees that give so much to the town? Kathy hit on a few things that are kind of gross, and we elaborate on those, but they're very much true. For $16 an hour on average, these folks are putting themselves out there for the town and the taxpayers. And again, if you want to take wage increases from people, you can freeze mine. But please give these folks their wages and keep their benefits. That's what they're here to work for. That they care, but that's what drives them to work for a municipality.
Nancy, I have a question for you. Since we don't go through a third-party administrator, all we get is a receipt when someone goes to the doctor or gets a prescription filled, so they're paying full boat on this thing? It's not a negotiated rate?
No, it goes through the insurance company, the employee brings the explanation of benefits in,
Right.
and the reduced amount is what they get reimbursed.
Okay, so the claim is filed,
Yes.
and then we pay the reduced amount? Okay.
And I think for Kathy and Bruce, this again points to, and we have several people in this room who sit on the compensation committee. I think these are you can't take care of these inequities with a 1% or 2%. I think, wasn't it 3% last year? It was a 3% increase last year, Bruce, so, you know, just to put it in perspective to what, again, my brother stood up here at a meeting not long ago, St. Mary's, 0, 2, and 0. So, and they're getting puked on and doing a lot of the same things, so.
They're making a lot more.
Exactly. And those inequities, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, trying to be objective, is what the compensation committee is going to eventually vet out. They're gonna come up and say,
You're only looking at full-timers, not part-timers.
then again, but the committee can kind of make a decision as it goes along. If it's not being rushed and pressured by what we're trying to do here tonight, but for June 4th or June 11th, if they're not pressured into it, I don't think anybody would see it unreasonable, once you put together that group of people who are gonna work hard at it, that you start to look at those inequities. But we won't even have that money available if we don't find a way to at least look at how do we smooth out these increases. Everybody's trying to do this. The federal government, Medicare, Medicaid, everybody, Affordable Health Care Act, everybody's trying to do it. And again, we're mostly dealing with a placeholder number. So even if we decided tonight to leave the deductible question off the table and go with the 1%, it's only $8,000. We could still have an impact on the budget by saying, Nancy, just put it in at 35,000. Because we did 33,000 last year, and you know what? With a $2 million undesignated fund balance and authority of this board, or the select board, or the future select board, not this one, to have $75,000, I think we could probably make up that. That's petty cash. But this budget going forward, we could say, take that placeholder number, don't make it 48, leave the deductible question to the reports that come in later from the compensation committee, and reduce it to 35,000. There's $13,000.
Steve?
I fully support your concept of give the hourly people the raises and look at management. However, I think we cannot, correct me, select board, I don't think that can be done due to contractual obligations with contract employees. I would 100% support that if it could be done, but I don't think it, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it can be done.
I don't think it.
We only have one contract.
You have a contract? No.
No, we have one.
There's only one contract.
employee.
Correct, and that's the contract is we can't, that's why you can't do that.
But you can, I mean, those discussions could take place, and I'm not sure if, to tell you the truth, we're at that point right now. Steve, I think as much as I'm waiting with bated breath for the compensation committee to come back with some of this data, some of the raw data I've seen, if you use it all and don't isolate health benefits or part-times, Raymond stacks up very well, especially we've done some of this review. It stacks up very well in some other departments and areas in terms of the benefits package with other towns. So I don't think that decision is gonna take a little more time. I think if we narrow our focus, I brought up the 500 because I really do feel from a responsibility point of view for all those people in the private sector that one thing, we're guaranteeing a job. We're not saying layoffs to anybody. And in this day and age right now, to say to anybody, whether you got a pick and shovel in your hand or you work in a town office, it's not a morale loser to know that your town's backing you up. We're not laying people off. You've got a job, and we are paying your health insurance, and we are giving you a raise. And compared to a lot of other folks, that's not bad.
If you take away the $3,000, they really don't have insurance.
Right.
They don't have insurance, period. I mean,
It's catastrophic insurance at this point.
but there's nobody at this table that would work for a company with, I mean, my employees would just walk out the door. If they didn't have $20, $30 prescription, if they got a bad back, chiropractor for $20, they didn't have that, they couldn't find an employee. And they're making a lot more than $30,000 an hour, a year.
So Ralph, you're suggesting the 1% and no change to the health package? How do people feel about that?
Okay.
Steve,
I'd stick with the 2%.
you would stick with 2?
I think the economy is,
I think I'm fine with the 1. I think at some point we need to start to differentiate and not look at these blanket 1%, 2%. I think it's,
Right, I agree. We had an
but for
approach,
now, it's the best.
merit and something
I would probably
different.
go 1%.
Either, how are you?
2%.
2%?
One.
Unless we can do a differential based on
Steve, how
management.
are you? 2. Mike? 2? Wow. I think it's close.
Part of my feeling on the 2% is we have so many people who share jobs. Our staff has been reduced the last 6, 8 years. Part of that is because of technology. We've had the ability to. Part of that is through slowdown in town needs. So we are down employees. But we've heard about the cross-training and the fact that we are getting down to to the minimums, and you've got people doing multiple jobs, shifting their desks, you know, moving around, and I just feel that, you know, we haven't, we have recognized this some years, but I just feel 2% is.
Okay, so why don't we do this? This is not binding by any stretch, but how many are at 2%?
Straw poll.
Straw poll. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many at 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Perfect.
5, 5, and
Yeah, and if I may, one thing, and I think
1.5.
Kathy and Bruce did bring up something, and you don't know, and you know, well, you do know how much that means to the people who work under you, that you just offered to forego. And one point, and neither of you two fit in this category, but of that $32,000 for the 2%, I believe 4 employees represent, Nancy, back me up on this, about 20% of that increase is represented by just 4 employees. And it's, yeah, that's what it's been. So 4 employees out of that $32,000 are the beneficiary of the 2%. And it doesn't include these 2 individuals. And that's where I'm saying to leave this to the compensation committee, let them do their work. This is an opportunity this year to say, we're not bad people, we did 1%, and we're studying it, and we're gonna come forward with, and at that point too, we really, Joe, you probably are feeling the same thing. Once we know the impacts of the Affordable Care Act, we probably have to revisit our health insurance book. It's probably time. We've done these stopgap.
The thing is that you have under 50 employees, and they're not impacted for a few years.
So, right.
They're not impacted per se, but it's gonna color what the,
it's gonna
color what the policy
$63
look like.
per employee tax.
So I mean, that,
Yeah.
you know.
So maybe
the
after-
fact of the matter is, you don't fall under the mandate, but you are gonna have an impact because it's gonna change the color of the policy.
Yeah. And so,
Well, they would be grandfathered for 2 more years until 2016. All right, so do we all agree on no change to the health benefit? Are we in agreement on that?
except if could I ask though, not changing the plan, but could we change the number?
I mean, that, how many
Could we
people?
change that number? That
Change the
number.
budget number.
Yeah, use a budget number. That's $13,000 immediately
Well,
goes.
I'm talking about the $500
Yeah,
deductible.
yeah,
That's fine.
we're good.
You good on
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay. I will agree with Charlie on this, but I won't go down to 35,000 if you use 33,000 this year.
Yeah.
I'm okay at 40, that saves you
There's the
$8,000,
It's a wash.
okay? Are people okay with that?
I
And it
think,
preserves the benefit.
Realistic.
I think going forward, you should perhaps do that number on a 5-year historical average than a
But they
contingent.
don't have 5 years, it only came into effect last year.
Do
So,
it on a 1 year.
Oh, 1-year rolling average.
so we
With a medical CPI,
Yeah,
All right.
rolling average.
1-year
yeah.
rolling average.
all right, so we saved $8,000,
which is the same number, just we preserve the benefit. So
okay?
that's good.
All right, so 8,000. As far as 1 or 2%, we're not there yet. We have, that's kind
What
of a
you,
wash.
I mean, what you could do there, Joe, where you've had some people that have volunteered or something, you could look at that pool of money and then work with that pool of money. Take the 1% as a pool of money and then work from there.
You know what, I appreciate them stepping forward, but to me, you treat everybody equitably.
Yeah, that's not a good precedent.
I just,
Unless you convert to a merit system.
right.
Which
and
we
Which
do.
is where we're discussing and
Right.
hopefully gonna be able to have that discussion further
Yep.
in the summer.
Yeah, so. All right. Move down the list here. All right, we everything on alternative 2 is covers alternative 1. So let's go to alternative 3. And we'll get down the list. All right. Travel and training for admin and staff. $3,000.
That's in the paving CIP.
Get past all the CIP stuff,
Okay.
and I'm starting past that.
All right.
Okay, so, okay, yeah.
All right? These are more things that can be cut. this is part of, Charlie's proposal to some extent, and
Yeah.
there are some other cuts thrown in there. Travel and training,
For the, admin
admin
staff?
staff, $3,000.
Yeah, I think travel training, fire rescue. All
So-
right,
So you don't want to, travel and training for fire rescue is out, is that what you're saying?
I never
Okay.
really considered that.
So let's take that one off
That
the
was the
table.
$22,000 line?
Right.
Yeah, I think they more than justified why that
Okay,
should be
let's take that off the table.
in there. I think the admin, travel and training was not to eliminate the whole admin line, is to say in recognition that other places in the public sector have frozen travel and training
Well,
for,
is this a frozen line? I mean, it's pretty much straight line.
That's it.
There's no increases in travel and training, is that correct? So these would be total eliminations,
well, I don't believe so.
Yes, it would be.
right?
Oh, conference, okay, conference, travel and training, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would consist of, Nancy, both the CEO and the town manager.
The CEO has his own line, right under town manager.
That's travel,
Admin
training,
staff
conference,
is-
town manager.
Oh, so that's.
Staff
Admin
is-
staff is the
admin,
staff and the
yeah.
workshops that they go through.
Yeah, then, yes, in that particular line, that's pretty bare bone, that's spread out, that $3,000 is spread out across, town clerk and, finance.
Tax collector.
Yeah, tax collector, yeah. I, just if I may, I didn't intend that to be on the table.
So, okay, everybody else okay with eliminating that? All right,
Which one was that again, Joe?
that's an admin, staff, travel and training, right under the CIP accounts, the $3,000. All right, how about conferences for the town manager?
And that's the one where, I think it's broken down, that includes the ICMA conference.
Yeah.
Which is approximately 2,500, and the asterisk, as to be noted, these are contractual items that would have to be voluntary and negotiate, well, they'd have to be voluntary. We're not negotiating it, we're saying, this is what we'd like to do, and then it'll be up to the town manager to say, yes, this 1 year, I would freeze and not go to ICMA. If you did that, you'd take 2,500 out of that 43. You'd keep the rest of the line in place, but you would just say for 1 year, we're just not gonna go to the ICMA conference. And that'll be the year that it'll probably be in Portland. But,
We just finished a town manager review, and I'm not in favor of cutting the contract that we talked about less than a month ago.
well, we wouldn't be cutting, we'd be asking for voluntary.
Same thing.
I think I agree
Recognition.
with Mike for a different reason. I think this belongs to the compensation committee. Let them make the decision on these type of things.
Yeah, my thing on all these voluntary ones is, we just renewed the contract.
Yep.
And to come back now at budget time and totally renegotiate, or ask them to voluntarily do away with these things doesn't sit well with me. How do people feel?
I have I just have a fundamental issue with when you start talking about cutting out training and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope because, when do you pick it back up? And, adding things back in is always harder than taking them out. And adding things back, with the number of changes are gonna be coming down the pike in the next couple of years on healthcare, on tax reforms and things like that. If we start cutting out the opportunities to find out some of that stuff that's going on and the work that gets done there, I think we're penny wise and pound foolish.
Well, and I agree with all those points of view as far as being reasonable. The one thing that we have to remember is that this is we just extended this contract for 2 years, so all of these numbers are in stone for at least 2 years so,
We extended the contract 1
For
year.
1 year,
well,
We
but
extended
it's,
the contract 1 year.
and it's a 2-year contract.
it's a 3-year contract.
Right, now it is, because we extended it 1 year, so
It's 1 year.
so we can banter about whether it's 1 year, it's a 3-year deal. So, that's all I'm saying.
Well, it still comes down to the fact of, do we feel there's value in training and things like that? And I think there is.
And I think the time to bring any of this up is during the contract evaluation process.
Yeah, but that's you guys in the executive session. We
That's
have
correct.
nothing to do with that.
That's correct.
So,
then
why
we
are we
might
even
as well-
discussing it?
Yeah, exactly, so then let's
Because
just,
it was brought up.
okay, so now that we know we don't go there, travel and training code enforcement. That was 1,500, so I am assuming that was the whole code enforcement.
Yep.
Travel and training. It sounds like the committee doesn't wanna really be looking at, well,
You know,
okay,
I
so,
just, you know, I mean, I see value that comes out of that. I
Right.
mean, you know, we're talking about, you know, looking at redoing some of the fee schedules and things like that, and I think you're gonna have, you know, you can, so you.
so
you know,
just to expedite, we can skip right down, and we're not gonna deal with the town manager auto stipend, cause that's a contractual issue. Vehicle and fuel maintenance code enforcement, $4,000, boy. Go look at other towns, and we're given, no, wait. We've already had this discussion, I'm just saying that seems to be a lot of money
Well, I think,
under the circumstances.
I think a lot depends on the area of the town you have. I mean, how much travel you go around and,
We're supplying the vehicle, Joe.
I know.
We're supplying the
So you
vehicle, we
don't
just
think-
put a new vehicle.
You don't think code enforcement officers in other towns have vehicles?
In Standish, you get $1,800, and you can get $700.
Tank of gas a week.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a tank of gas a week.
yeah, coming out of our pumps.
Yeah. You're
It's,
still accounting for it someplace.
yeah, exactly, but $4,000 for maintenance too? It's maintenance and fuel.
Could I speak to that?
Go ahead.
Before I had a vehicle, the amount of mileage that I used was $4,000 when I got paid 55 cents a mile per the federal limit. It was 4,000. I haven't increased this at all. I do have a vehicle now, which I totally explained at the last meeting how we obtained that vehicle. So there's no more increase in my budget. It's the same amount of money.
No, but Chris, I think you're missing the point. If you were Jack Cooper driving your Ranger around, we'd be giving you $4,000.
Correct.
Now we're giving you a car and $4,000.
No, you're not.
We're not?
You're not giving me $4,000.
It's
That
in the
pays for the
budget.
gas that goes in that vehicle and the repairs to that vehicle.
It repairs?
But to Charlie's point, if you were equating it to the 55 cents a mile, the 55 cents a mile is a federal government agreed price, includes the depreciation of the vehicle as part of that. If you actually look at the cost of running a vehicle, you're down much below 55 cents a mile. 55 cents a mile is supposed to reimburse someone for the cost of the gas, the maintenance, and the depreciation on that vehicle, the intrinsic cost of the vehicle on a per mile basis.
But in government work, you don't get depreciation.
Say again?
You don't use depreciation in government work. It's only in
No, but when
private
they're
industry.
reimbursing on a private vehicle, when you are getting reimbursed for the depreciation. It's the cost of the
Of the
asset.
maintenance, right.
It's the asset cost, so you amortize your cost of the vehicle, it's a $30,000 vehicle, it's got so many miles of life on it, that's part of the 55 cents.
This is another used vehicle and owned by the town. Everybody's clear on that, right? This is not his vehicle.
Well, I
We're
understand.
clear on that. We didn't used to provide a vehicle.
If, I'm gonna move south, one town. If you were in Wyndham, you'd have 3 code enforcement vehicles. And their maintenance and their gas for their vehicles would be covered by the town. This is a budget item to run the department. It's not a compensation item. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the compensation item is when we say it's a tank of gas, that vehicle technically, I don't care if it's $18 a week or $18 a month. We never used to pay for that. The code enforcement officer is not critical staff like the public works director or the fire chief. And so we now have put, where we never did it before, we put a vehicle, a town-owned vehicle, under the CEO, who then, for a few dollars a week, can take that from this office, right here, to his home, and come back every morning and whatever else he does during the time of the day, but we're, $4,000, if all we had was a pool vehicle, like in the state of Maine, where you just run in, and okay, in some towns like Standish, they carry a little bit of some because they have a fleet of trucks that we have, and say, hey, today you're gonna get this truck if you get things planned. I'm just saying that $4,000 for going from this office here to the various places just in Raymond, and maybe we bought the wrong vehicle. It's similar to the it's not an Escalade, what is it?
Silverado or?
What is it? A Tahoe. It's like driving around in a Tahoe. Doesn't make sense. It costs lots of money to be.
Four-wheel drive in Raymond makes sense. Four-wheel
I
drive
think-
makes sense.
Yeah, we were just talking about having to pull out trucks,
Yeah.
garbage trucks, because they go off the
All
road.
agreed.
But, I mean, so why would you expect someone to buy a vehicle and go down some of these camp roads that are total disaster this time of year and ruin their vehicle?
Only because that's the way we used to do it. It's just
Well,
that it's.
you know what, we've evolved
You know,
as a town.
yeah.
Yeah, we used to wear
Right.
loincloths, now we're all wearing clothing. You know, and-
But to be saying that if we've evolved as a town, what's our gas mileage? What are we running on that vehicle? Or what do we run on the
I
Silverado?
can answer that. That truck gets about 17 miles to the gallon, the Tahoe does.
Okay, now, no offense to anybody, but how much does a Subaru four-wheel drive get? An
Well, we
Outback?
couldn't find a Subaru Outback. That was the only vehicle
Right,
that came
I'm
apparent.
just saying,
You
is
can't buy a
that,
Subaru Outback for $5,000 or $7,000.
exactly. So when you make decisions that aren't good decisions about what we're buying and purchasing and running, there's a cost to it.
I'm gonna take some of the responsibility for this, because I'm the one that pushed forward the four-wheel drive vehicle. He was spending $4,000, he was getting $4,000 a year in vehicle stipend. Why don't we put it into a town vehicle that we can have? And there it is.
Steve?
Do you keep a log?
I used to when I kept track of my mileage, I don't need to
Okay.
now.
This is where, I know,
Yeah.
I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of logs. This is where logs, we could end this whole discussion. I just calculated out, I don't remember what we pay for gas. But at $3.75 a gallon, that's about 12,000 miles a year. Logs would help
Well,
to,
we're paying $2.74 a gallon.
okay.
But that's without any kind of repair, you're not including any.
No, I'm only taking $3,000 in gas.
Okay.
Yeah, as I say, it works out, it's about
Yeah,
a
that's-
tank of gas a week.
That seems pretty fair, actually.
This is
See it like that.
perhaps something that.
Well,
you know,
I
is a
would
little
like to
difficult
correct one thing I said. I do have a log.
Okay.
I keep track of every inspection everywhere I go. So I know how much, I could figure out how much mileage I do.
That would be helpful. I've never-
Between, for the last 3 years, I put between 5,000 and 7,000 miles a year on just for inspections.
I think you're right up above that right now.
Bob, you had something?
I think most of you guys have a pretty good memory. When the code enforcement officer used to drive his own personal POV, and he went to a inspection site and got shot at.
Shut up. Yeah.
I would want my code enforcement officer to have a town vehicle that's marked.
So we should get him a Humvee.
Get him a
Because
Humvee or
it's
a
such
tank.
a
That
rough
would be
town.
real reasonable.
Yeah.
No, I think that, I was gonna make that point. I think the point is, this vehicle is a nice appearing vehicle, it's clearly marked, people know who he is. I'm not saying it's gonna prevent someone from shooting at him, but it certainly does help to eliminate the confusion that exists in certain people's minds over whether he's there under color of authority, or whether he's just somebody with Subaru, which is what he had.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can move on.
Joe.
That's,
Did we leave his training budget alone?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
We left all the training budgets alone.
Could I ask Chris a question?
Yep.
Chris, if we do go forward with electrical permits, do you need any more training? Do you need any more
I would just need to
certification?
continue my training, but like I do with all the other 9,
Would that be an increase to this cost?
no.
Thank you.
All right, so vehicle fuel and maintenance for the code enforcement officer.
Keep it the same.
Everybody okay?
Yep.
All right, so that pretty much gets us down to the use of the cell tower money and bonding. Yes.
One thing is the $20,000 in GIS, which has not been addressed all night. I asked what that was. I saw a proposal from, and I don't know if it was the final one, from Sebago Techniques, What I read into that was, it appeared to me that we are spending 20 grand to put all our maps on a new software system, which Sebago Techniques doesn't even know how to use. This is clearly, in my category, goes into the want-to-do category. I think our maps are fine. I'm wondering, there's 20 grand. Do we need to spend that this year to put our maps on a new software system?
I think those software systems are updated constantly, but.
No, this was according to the proposal, this was a brand-new software system that Sebago Techniques had to, the first step in their line item of duties was to learn the software system.
Don, can you address this? I'm not well. Chris, can you address this?
Danielle or Chris?
Danielle?
It's what it is they're taking all the data that's already been compiled and created and making it accessible and available to the public. And through doing that, we had them do something that was open source versus using ArcViewer. So they had to, it was not something, a product that they were familiar with, so they did have to kind of become accustomed to it, but.
So we went open source because the technology committee recommended all open source for the
Yeah,
town.
because because we had a choice, we could go, I know Sam can attest this, there's a company called AppView that also applied for the position of GIS, and we could give them all of our software and send it out to them, but then the issue is that then on their servers, they have control of it, so we're maintaining control here and keeping use of the equipment that Kevin has built for us within the technology department and keeping the open source
And by using,
standard that we have maintained over these years as a cost savings.
Okay, thank you.
by using open source, of course, we don't have to pay licensing fees, which all other towns that I know about pay. And so that's a significant amount of money.
That's your 20,000 plus.
But I don't see the $20,000 deduction anywhere in licenses fees in the budget.
Well, because you're not buying
Because you're not
that
buying it.
product.
We haven't for years.
You're not licensing anything here because
Okay,
it's all open
but
source.
this was started last year.
No.
Ongoing.
The GIS
Switched.
has been going for 5 or 6 years, at least.
We switched service providers from the town of Wyndham, who no longer would do it for us.
Yeah, that was almost a $40,000 contract.
Right.
Town of Wyndham used to do our GIS. They
Is it
told us.
40 or 20?
They told us,
I thought it was like
I think,
It was
Elisa-
half of 40, it was
Yeah, it was
20.
20.
20.
so Town of Wyndham told us we couldn't have GIS anymore through them. What you're gonna see in your budget is a zero line item. I can't explain where the Wyndham money was, you'll have to ask.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
All I see is a $20,000 increase.
Right, and it's,
I don't see a $40,000 decrease.
of money.
we'd have to get you that, and I can't. do it off
Nancy,
the top
can you
of my
help
head.
us with that?
Part of it came from unexpended TIF monies, which were in the reserve account, and part of it came from GIS under technology.
So basically, this is flat money.
I think it's a little bit more now because we no longer have the TIF reserve.
No, but I'm saying in terms of what we're
Yes.
spending.
Who was doing the GIS before Wyndham? Do you remember that
Jack
guy's
Cooper.
name?
No, there was someone.
We went a couple of years without it.
We had, Elisa Trapani was doing
Yeah,
it.
but before that,
Remember we
that.
had Jack
Lex-
Cooper was doing it as part of his part-time
We had
work.
a woman named Lexi when I first came here, I forget her last name, but that's, do you remember her? She was the first one. Then it was Elisa.
There was Elisa
Trapani.
on staff, and then it was Elisa in Wyndham. And then in between, we had nothing, which is how we got behind on the road improvement study, because we didn't have the
I
map.
We
think
had
Dana's
somebody-
correct. There was
we had
one year
somebody,
where
Mark Gendron,
we paid,
knew
yeah.
the guy.
It was a year.
Oh, we had tax maps done by Jim
Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah.
Just tax maps.
Exactly.
All he did was tax maps.
He didn't do
Right.
GIS?
No.
He does do GIS though.
We asked him to submit, he did not want to submit.
Okay.
What would happen if we didn't spend that money? This is where I still not clear.
We have a 3-year contract with them.
Steve, the GIS backs up all of our assessing data.
Right, but those maps are done, aren't they? I guess I guess I'm still
change
trying to
all
get my
the
hands
time.
around, what are we paying for?
They change all
The
the time.
updates.
Yeah.
With every sale, every parcel that gets bought and
Road name
sold,
changes.
road name changes, they're
Culverts.
constantly evolving. They're
Yeah,
not,
and-
every month they're different.
Here's one of the difficulties, and I know the compensation committee will have its hands full, but one of the difficulties is I've looked over probably 15 other municipal budgets right now. one problem the town of Raymond has doing any comparable data is, the data ain't comparable. You can't find a format that is the same anywhere. Standish, Wyndham, Gray, Casco, it's almost impossible to find out what are the benefits of a town manager. Specifically, unless you go there and camp out in the office and
Read
have.
the contract.
And read their contract. It's almost impossible. I will tell you, based on my review of at least just today alone, looking at the GIS system, that a lot of towns are paying like $8,000 for the core service, what they need to do for GIS. So unfortunately, if we locked into a 3-year contract, shame on us. But I may be wrong, because someone in this room can do all that research and go to every town and try to break down what they're paying for GIS. But when you get into the line items of most towns, you see 8,000, you see 9,000. Now, those are maintenance systems, I'm sure, for the taxes and the overlays. But we have spent a lot of money in this town for GIS, a ton of money. And I think the point is well taken that it's like, I need a new VCR, and then, oh, now I need a Blu-ray, and now I need whatever the next new technology is. You can't, you're not gonna outrun technology unless you wanna pay for it every time.
Yeah, I would say that there was something missing when you reviewed those budgets, because the licensing fees in the towns that have GIS would be equivalent to the number you're quoting, let alone the people who actually do the work.
I looked at those budgets, Don, they didn't mention licensing fees.
Well, they must have it under another line.
I looked at
They
all
have
the
it-
other lines,
they
that's
must
what's
have it
very
under another line.
difficult to find those numbers.
Well, that becomes an issue.
That's an issue, you can't find those, what is a reasonable price to be paying for GIS services? It's hard to find.
Again, I can go one town south. Wyndham, who was providing our GIS service, could no longer provide our GIS service because they were getting busier, and they have a full-time person dedicated to GIS in Wyndham. They used to share that with us when times had slowed down. They didn't have the room to do it for us anymore, so they canceled, or they didn't want to renew our contract. So there's, I don't know what that salary is, but that's somebody within their assessing or planning department or the combination, that's all they do, 40 hours a week is GIS.
And that's one take when you talk about the difficulties and the politics between towns. When you read Tony Plant's budget message, he says the town of Raymond dropped them. So, what is the truth?
We had their GIS person in front of us who said, no, we can't do it anymore.
Right.
So, you know,
read when they do their justification in their lines, they're saying they lost the revenue because
kinda like the county manager saying 65% of the county increases due to the civic center.
That's what they're saying. So
That is not true.
Who do you believe? Right?
Exactly.
I've got that message too, Joe.
I'm sure you do.
I would like to throw out one that was not included that I think deserves at least a discussion is the video broadcasting salary. You've seen from 010 it was 36, then 36, then 9235, then 12,293, and we've plugged it in for 17,160. Also, again, doing research on what other towns are paying for video broadcasting. I'm not saying station managers, because we're not creating shows. I'm not trying to minimize anybody's work ethic and their work product, because when you have to bear the brunt of coming in early and sitting here with a 5-hour marathon meeting and then close this shop up afterwards, I don't think we could pay a guy enough, or a gal enough, to do that. It's not, sometimes we've driven these costs ourselves. However, and I just want to make this point, and it is what it is. This request came to us from the Technology Committee that its charge is to, by having video broadcasting, is to promote transparency in the town of Raymond and its government. Yet this recommendation was never put in any minutes, there was never any vote taken, and it was never broadcast to the public. We got a letter from the chair, I suppose, of the Technology Committee telling us this is what they wanted. But when I tried to research and asked once before, several months ago, why their meetings aren't broadcast, well, they don't make policy decisions. Well, this seems to me a policy decision to me. And it's not voted, It wasn't recorded, there are no minutes. And I think at this point, when you look at the increase of that and not trying to, and maybe we include a 1% or a 2% increase, depending on what the other employees get into the line, but to take carte blanche without any backup data, any backup rationale, except for all that came from the source, again, looking at other towns, what they're paying for their people in a broadcast, to broadcast these meetings and the other meetings, is far less.
But we're not only just broadcast, it's not like someone just sits there. But we require streaming, we require
Well, no.
CDs to be burned.
Yeah.
We require it be put on the website so you can watch it on the website afterwards. It's not just video broadcasting.
And this
There's a big
comes down
difference.
to degree and kind of service that you want to provide. We're getting more and more and more requests, more pressure. People like Mr. Levitt, for instance, make requests frequently of information, DVDs. You know, when is something gonna be up and broadcast? I get frequent emails from Mr. Levitt. When is that gonna happen? Can it happen faster? People in the outside world are asking that question. They want us to be streaming everything. We're trying to do every meeting we can possibly do. Now, on the issue of the technology committee, they're largely workshop meetings. There are a couple committees of the town that are that way. Certainly, if they're going to make any policy discussions, we could arrange for that to be broadcast. I think this is one of those questions you have to ask yourself. Are we moving towards more content online? Do we need more staff to do that? Or are we willing to do less? And if we're willing to do less, you're going to get less.
Steve?
All night long, when it comes up to compensation, it's kind of been, we've said, let the compensation committee handle it. I think this is another great one for the compensation committee to look at, because now we're getting the differential raises, where when we said differential raises earlier, it was no, we're gonna treat everyone the same. So, one of the others, so I think I really recommend this go to the compensation committee as another area to look at.
And I'd go with the 2% or whatever
The rest of
gets, that's what that number should be.
Mike?
Under the budget presented, the paragraph reads, "This position has been called a videographer when it actually also entails station management duties and responsibilities. Increase of $48.67 in salary brings us a little closer to reality, from $15.76 to $16.50. It's a 75 cent per hour increase, changing from a videographer to a station manager, station management. It also includes a 5-hour per week increase from 15 hours per week to 20 hours per week." So that's the explanation of how that happened.
So that would be 3%
Just so-
increase.
I just think we're asking a lot more of that person than we did in the past. Before, it was just sit there and wait for these meetings to end. Now we're asking them to do a lot more, and he can't do it in the time that he's here. So, it's not a huge increase. How do other people feel?
Well, I think you've got a double thing, you've got increased hours, I mean, there's an increment in wage, but you've got increased hours also, so I mean, it's not just a straight line move, so.
The one thing I do get a lot of comments on is how many people watched these meetings. And if we're gonna have, if that's one of the things that people in town really like to do, why not provide them?
Joe, it's a beer game, I gotta tell you. That's all, every time you say a certain word, that's the only reason.
Usually it's Charlie, right?
Video broadcasting salary, is it a salary or is it hourly?
Hourly.
Hourly.
Can we change that word from salary? When I think of salary,
Right. Yeah. Right.
I do think that because we're keeping everything else the flat rate, I think we should be appropriately flat with this as well. So if there's an incremental need for additional hours, that's fine. I would, because we're not managing it, and we'll try to take care of it in the compensation committee. Not speaking for the chair, apologies. But I do think that we should keep it at whatever rate, the 2 or the 1 or
Whether we
whatever.
go 1 or 2.
Whatever we
but
do, I think.
allow the increase in hours.
Yes.
Yes, that would be my suggestion.
I think that's fair enough. And then look at it as part of the
As part of
compensation
the,
committee. That makes sense. Everyone okay with that?
Except this is an employee position, this is not it's an hourly, how is this how do we treat, is
It's a
this
part-time employee, I would guess. He's
Right.
paid from the
It's
town.
20, does 20 put you over, and does that become full-time?
No.
No.
What, 30 hours of full-time?
They'll get there though.
Depending on
I will make a comment, and to Charlie's point before about the comments that came along with this, that Mike read about this should really be a full-time position. That is policy, and at some point, we probably should discuss that kind of approach, because that's a major difference, and it goes back to what everybody's saying and what Don said earlier, is like, what do you want? But my personal opinion is that I don't believe we need to have a full-blown, you know,
Unless you're gonna start having shows,
it just seems to me to be a lot, and I understand the technology
like
committee.
the Charlie Levitt show.
You know what, that could have big ratings.
For the salary I'm getting, it's a
It
deal.
could be big ratings, and we could make it a revenue stream. I think,
That's why I
It
don't
was
get
a
back
joke,
my.
Charlie, it was a
No, I
joke,
took
all right?
it that way, Joe. Hey, we're gonna get done before midnight, that's no joke.
Well, I'm hoping we wrap it up soon. So,
Give 'em 3
are there any
3%
more
off of
outstanding
that.
issues
Times that's more
that we
than
haven't addressed? So can we get back to the bonding?
Really? Don't let the facts get in the way.
No, I can't let the facts. He shot himself in the foot.
Where are we? I threw out the idea of a $500,000 road improvement. Where are people on that idea?
Is that forgoing any bonding request from the town?
No.
No. That is
this
for
would be a
maintenance.
bridge.
That would be a
almost like
bridge.
This is a
It would allow-
bridge to, until we get the bond.
That would be for this summer versus for
Right.
next summer.
Do you wanna comment? I mean, is that the, okay. I mean, I didn't know if that's the right amount. I mean, he said he could absorb a 1 point whatever, but.
I mean, you know, one time, many meetings ago, Nathan said, if you give me $500,000 a year, I can do a lot with it. Isn't that what you said, Nathan?
That is what I said.
Nate show.
$500,000 would get us quite a ways this year. That would give you some operating money through this coming summer. And then you'll be able to get a plan ready for the following construction season to pick up the bond.
Right.
I think that's great.
But in the same time, be moving towards the bond.
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. This is a
So
bridge
it's
until we get
basic
to
both, but the bond within this fiscal year.
I thought I was gonna find out whether we could get the bond approved this year, and then how long it would take.
How
We
long
could
we
hold
could
it
hold
before
on
we
to
issue
it.
it, sort of like the government.
So,
Maybe not.
so out of that $900,000 now, you can subtract another $225,000 to bring the road maintenance up to $500,000. So that brings you down to $675,000.
As kind of a request, just to back this up and support this, is it possible to go through the road improvement committee final report and say, okay, what will that $500,000 do? In other words, we can take care of these fixes, which should then, because I am concerned about the, one question was up, is we spent $500,000 now, we don't get to do it all. Is that cost gonna creep up because we didn't get to some of the roads and now they're in worse condition?
I'm looking to him as the
Every
expert.
year that you put off anything on the road, your deterioration's gonna start catching up to you. The ratings that we gave the roads last year will have changed by this year. As far as a list of what we could pave with the 500,000, yes, I could pull that together fairly easy.
Well, what I'm looking at is, okay, this is what we would do with the 500,000 and this is how much is left. So this is.
For paving?
This is how much money we need to finish. Is it still,
Well, it's a 2 million.
is it 1.5
It's
or?
an ongoing thing.
1.7.
You're gonna be putting money into the roads every year.
No, I know, but
The bond request would be reduced by $225,000.
No, I
No,
don't think so.
no, it's
Bond
not.
We're
request
still
is still-
looking at $2 billion.
Bond request is still staying at 2 million because
now
what
the
you're gonna
bond's
do
out.
is you have more than $2 million worth of project work to be done. What we've said is, in that 3-year period, what you're doing here is you're shifting out when you can, when you're gonna be able to start that. If we take this 500, we're moving, that gets us through this year. We still have to get to the point and be ready to go next year. You still have that 3-year window to build out in.
Right, but we've taken 220, we've said to the community, we need $2 million, correct?
No, you
Plus,
really need.
plus
the
our
next 3 years.
plus our 275 that we're already committed to, we should be committed to.
So the 275 is your maintenance money.
Right, so now we've said to the community, we want a $2 million bond, not a $6 million bond, we want a $2 million bond. Now, we've taken out of the tower money, $225,000 to put towards, not road maintenance, but to start the work, jumpstart the work for road improvement,
Right.
okay?
Yeah.
So why doesn't that 225 come out of the 2 million?
Because it's an ongoing thing, it cycles. I mean, when you look at that Road Improvement Commission report, you see it as a 10-year life cycle, and then the roads start to deteriorate. So you need to stay ahead of that 10 years, is what you're trying to do. And get on a cycle where every year you're doing a little more and extending the roads out for at least 10 years.
But that was the idea of the
Well,
bond.
a $2 million bond isn't gonna cover
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
half of the roads.
It was only
And you're
half
still
the-
gonna have the other half
Yeah.
to
There's
take care
another
of.
bond in the future, is what we're saying.
Well,
Right.
maybe.
Maybe, well, part
But
of
this
the,
would be now over a 4-year period versus a 3-year period,
Correct.
right? Because the
Right.
bond would fund essentially
And
the
last- the next
improvement
3
on
years.
years 2, 3, and 4, so that's one thing that changes.
adds a year.
So, we're adding a year into that so the 225 is kind of an improvement on year 1, and then you go up to your roughly 500,000 for years 2, 3. Sorry, that's wrong.
700,
Yes, 750, 666.
Right.
667.
Steve?
So are you really saying, Joe, you just wanna bump the 275 to 500, and we're gonna get the 225, we're gonna take it from there?
Yeah,
And then the bond's a separate issue?
right.
Okay.
Oh, so you're saying you're putting it into road maintenance?
Well,
The
maintenance,
CIP
repaving.
pavement account.
Yeah.
That's the only paving account I have is the CIP paving account. And we
That-
take out of that account the road construction, any material that goes into that project, any subcontracting, and go forward with it.
But you can get us a list like Steve asked for.
Correct.
Fairly quickly,
Yeah.
which we would have before a vote, we would know what you were gonna do with that money.
I would recommend probably overlays on stuff like Raymond Cape Road's mostly binder from halfway in. I got a bunch of those roads
You'll
kicked
get it
around.
to us so that we understand, and then that
Can we
goes.
do anything on 85 and all those holes along the sides?
The state's coming in this spring supposedly if their budget passes, and they're gonna do a maintenance overlay,
Okay.
which is
Part of-
crap, but it'll get it
part
by
of what
another
They'll
year.
get us through.
Part of what you need to understand in that, there's a road management program, which is driving all that. The data, Nathan's inputting the data in there, so
I knew
that's,
it was dead,
that's
so-
an, it's an evolving thing,
Someone's gonna get killed.
as that changes, is to be the guiding document, and it really shouldn't, you should be changing from that only under emergency situations and things like that. The whole thing is to put some discipline in there and says, okay, the management program is saying that based on, what you've got, here's your priorities. And if you're not following that, then what you're gonna do is you're forcing money out down the road that you're gonna have to spend at a higher rate.
One of the questions I have on this 900,000, are the attorney's fees coming out of that, or
Yes.
they are coming out of that?
Our share of the cost is coming out of that.
We're not making the buyer pay our attorney fees?
Based on the first thing I saw, there was
So we're not
some money
We're
coming
not
out.
netting 900,
We're not netting 900.
I think that's correct.
Okay,
so we should better start using
So
that
you-
other number,
so you're probably looking at 850.
850. That's probably a better number to use.
Okay.
So now we're down at,
So now you're down to 625 left over. You got 80,000 in CIP, how do you wanna handle that? Part of the budget, or do you wanna pay for it out of the 625?
625.
Take it out of the 625?
You're talking about, wait a minute, you're talking about the numbers from all,
I'm talking about these
Two.
numbers that
Yep.
Public Works CIP, Fire Rescue CIP,
I know.
the paving you're actually, yeah, I guess you're taking it out of there, and the municipal facilities CIP. That's $80,000.
I mean, I would say take it out of that only because interest is so lousy now. If you weren't using that, you're not gonna be getting anything on it anyway, so you might as well use it against there.
Okay, so working off the number 625, because I'm taking out 50,000 in attorney's fees, that gets us down to 545.
and there's 400,000 in the CIP if we started to look at the improvement for 13-14 based on the report that came in our
So
packet.
if you buy everything in that first year of the CIP, that's another 400,000.
Well, even the following year also.
13-14. It's budget year 13-14.
That's this budget cycle,
Correct.
right? So you take out another 400,000 for that.
And if you did that,
Yeah.
you would not be taking out anything out of your savings account that you also have built for some of those things. We do have some funds.
There is a reserve fund.
There are some reserve funds, so you wouldn't dig into your reserve funds, which may help you bridge the gap until you can get your proper, CIP.
Are we all on the same
Plan.
page? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, I think it's,
Well, I just wanna make sure that we've got the discipline to say, okay, 80,000 now, but what do we do a year from now? We're gonna come back into some CIP expenses, or
That's where the.
is it gonna be
the-
harder to
The
do that
idea of
for
the
us?
bond for the CIP for the
Yeah,
future,
but not
which Charlie
for,
presented.
not forever,
No,
because we're gonna have
No.
CIP expenses
Right,
going up.
but then by that time, some other bonds will have,
But you don't have to take out a bond on the equipment CIP for another year,
right, which is,
because you're already dealing with the first year.
We're gonna stop accruing for CIP for a while, because the bonds are gonna take care of it. That's my point. Are we gonna be able to go back in and reaccrue
Oh,
in 2 years,
when
or?
we start it back up again?
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to, we're
Right,
gonna have to
yeah.
at some
Oh,
point.
it's not a
It's not a
total
either
fix.
or.
It's a,
Yeah, I mean, you know, because if you know, it's what, quite frankly, it's one of the things that the bonding agencies are gonna look at, is what, what is your capital improvement plan? You know, do you have, have you accounted for this stuff?
We can't
breaking
have
down
zero
as you go out?
So, 145,000,
left.
Is that the balance?
that's the balance that you have left after doing what we've done so far.
It's an escalator, isn't it?
So do you put that in
Couple, I think.
undesignated fund balance and sit it out and watch what happens? Or do you put it towards something?
Put it towards the roads, more roads.
Is that what people want to do?
well, where would this get I mean, I'm not sure anybody's done the math here, but are we below LD1 in the stuff that we've made?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Because it'd be an interesting thing, do you apply it to the, do you apply it essentially like an undesignated fund, do you apply some of it to the budget to keep us below LD1 for one more year? I don't know.
That's an option.
I don't know, I don't think
That's
there's
an
any
option,
magic in LD1
But
per se.
remember, that's an option some people don't like because they want to see it going towards something.
Something, yeah, that's fair.
So Don, I guess,
We're gonna work the numbers and get something
work
back
the
here.
numbers and let us take a look.
Yeah, I mean,
Does
you
that
know,
make sense?
Is there anything
Yeah,
unclear,
because you still have the wild card that's coming. I mean, you still have Joe,
But you're clear on everything that's happened so far?
I mean, Joe, you still have the wild card coming down the pike, which we still don't have a
State.
real good handle on, which is
It's the state.
what's, you know, what, no, I'm talking to school.
Right.
That's not our gig.
I know it's not our gig, but it's still, I mean, it's still hitting it in the mill rate.
It's 2% from last year increase.
2.26, I think.
Well, yeah,
Well, it all depends how it gets divvied out for
Yeah.
town.
Well, that's Raymond's share, Joe.
2%?
Yes.
2% of what?
That's not what they
I don't
told
think
me.
so.
I thought we were like 8.
yeah, I thought, I.
2% for increase from last year.
That's on the
For
overall
Raymond?
budget though,
Yes.
Dana.
That's the whole budget.
2.26, but then it's what's over EPS, our share of it's 30-something
Well, then, no,
percent.
that-
I
that's-
thought we were like at 8.6% increase for Raymond.
It's,
I think keeping that 145 to see what happens with the state.
Yeah, I think
I
we
mean,
kind of.
is-
By the way-
Yeah, because what's the
Our
homestead,
exposure's about-
what's the homestead exemption?
The homestead was what, 50?
Yeah.
I've got it somewhere.
Sam, I should mention, I bumped into Katrina Sangster the other day, who's the chair of the RSU 14 Board of Education, and she offered to come to a meeting or to do any explanation. She was commenting that we should probably have more of a better dialogue between, so she had offered up that.
idea.
Yeah.
So-
The other thing they could do would be to send some numbers.
I mean, homestead is
Well,
55.
the budget's been presented.
They haven't sent anything to us.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Well, it's on the
Because, I mean,
website.
you know,
They're discussing
haven't
it,
said
but they
anything to us.
haven't voted on it yet.
I mean,
Right, well,
you
if
know,
they're going through their, matter of fact, tomorrow night, I think they have another,
I mean, you know, I mean, there's,
hearing.
I wouldn't allocate that at this point until we see.
I agree. I mean, you're talking 70,000 between homestead and better. And then you got 220,000 in municipal revenue sharing.
I mean, I'm more, this point, I'm more concerned on the homestead, because that's, you know,
That's,
that you're gonna, people are gonna see that as a direct increase, so.
so we'll sit on the 145 as a reserve.
Well, I do need to,
Well, I would
'cause
at least, right, not necessarily, you know, at the end of the day, it may not, but I'm
Right.
saying right now, until we get a little bit more clearance on what's happening up the road.
I just need a clarification, because we've seen the first CIP numbers, and then on last Friday afternoon at 3:30, we got the new numbers. Nate, 2013-14, this budget, how much did you request for CIP?
It was $110,000.
And that was just for that one dump?
Dump truck.
And Bruce? You were at 288, weren't you?
I think they were like 290.
So in this budget, this fiscal year budget, we're saying
400,000.
400,000. Right. So
So, Joe, when
I
are you
just
gonna-
wanna make sure, because
Sam, when are you?
your number went down
When are you
70
guys
G.
gonna get back
We
together?
took all
to
the,
your
we took quite a bit out.
crunch
Right.
numbers?
Right.
Well, Don needs to run these numbers now, and Nancy, get back to us. When's our next meeting, our selectmen meeting?
April 2nd.
So next Tuesday.
One quick question, if I can, to Rolf and Nate. Sorry, I was looking at this now, and if we're gonna give them $500,000 to pave roads, I take my glasses off because the print's so fine.
Yeah.
That's gonna go to the Cape Road?
No. We're doing it, I think it's about $80,000 a mile for overlay right now.
Right.
We've got,
I live down there, you don't need to do that road.
well, it's just binder, it's just base now. If you don't take care of it, it's gonna start breaking up.
But is that the top priority?
My top priority is getting the overlay on top of the binder. We've got binder on Mountain Road, Spiller Hill, and Raymond Cape Road. If you don't put the surface on, the wear surface on, there's 2 inches of pavement down right now. And you'll start seeing the rutting here pretty quick. It's
Okay,
starting to
so
rut.
it's like a buildup before you get a crown.
Correct.
Okay.
I live down where he's talking about, and he does need to do it.
And that is why you let the management program run, because there's always.
Maybe we should take out the select board involvement in that.
Because there, I mean, you know, and quite frankly, I mean, that is why you want that program, to do, because it takes into account traffic load and things like that, which, you know, what can happen is you can have somebody look at it and say, well, you know, you're doing this one instead of that one. Instead of that one, there may be a reason. The traffic load may say that one's gonna break down in 2 years. The traffic load on the other one says it's gonna break down in 3 years. So even though it doesn't look as bad, from a full maintenance and from a full going forward standpoint, you're better off to do the other one first. And
Right.
that's what the program helps do.
So, no, we didn't take any really binding votes on anything here. We have a framework to look at. Don and Nancy will run the numbers. Next Tuesday, we have a selectmen meeting. We invite all of you to come to the selectmen meeting and at least continue this discussion on the budget to see what the numbers look like.
And I know this is an extremely tight time frame now, between this Tuesday night, or this Monday night and next Tuesday night. However, the last time, some of us didn't even get some of this information. We were presented three alternative budgets that we got at 3:30, that were available at 3:30 on Friday, for presentation on Monday at 7 o'clock. And I'm just asking, and I know it's gonna be a lot more difficult now that we've kind of jammed this into, get it done by April 2nd. So I think I appreciate Joe's comments about, we're just gonna look at it, we're really not intent, because by the time we get these recalculated numbers, it still needs, and there's still time. That's why we have these meetings, is there's still time, and there's obviously more information, school department and whatnot, state legislature, there's still more inputs that we're gonna get anyway, but we probably made some progress tonight.
But my point in asking the question is, I'm trying to look at, from a scheduling standpoint, when are we gonna have warrant articles to look at?
We're gonna need, well, I hate to talk for Sam, but we're gonna need another meeting after the 2nd, for sure. Probably the following week.
So you're looking, you're targeting having your warrant articles by the 9th? Correct?
That would be my hope, that the week of the 8th, sometime that week, we vote on the warrant articles, and then send it to you, or vote, maybe the week of the 15th?
I mean, are people
Is
available
that
that
school
week of the
vacation week?
15th?
No, the week after.
Okay. And then that just beats Louise's timeline to get
No,
this
the
out,
week of the
right?
15th, not the
That's good.
April 24th.
Hmm?
15, 16, 17. We don't know. I mean,
I wanna have, make sure we get.
No,
We could be way.
we don't think we're there yet.
We'll talk about the dates, we
No.
gotta know the dates of this stuff.
I don't have, like, can you send out like 2 or 3 alternatives? Or,
Yeah.
I don't have my phone's in the car.
Yeah, I'm at
Okay,
15, 16,
well, let me do the, I mean, if they're, to give, probably the day to look at would be like the 22nd, but,
That's school vacation.
that's school vacation. So
I'm in, but
Doesn't bother me.
I mean, Louise was hoping to get it by the 19th and send it out to the printer by then.
Not gonna happen.
But I mean, it's Dana,
I'm fine.
Steve,
Yeah?
Where are we?
week of the 22nd.
22nd?
It's fine.
Okay?
Okay,
22's good.
so why don't we schedule,
School vacation.
Sam, we're gonna schedule for the 22nd, so we'd like to have it as far in advance of that as we can.
Yep.
The 20th, maybe?
I was more thinking maybe that week before.
I think we're getting closer.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
7 p.m., right?
Yep.
The week of the 20th.
7 p.m.
Pick a date, yeah.
it's all USA.
No, it isn't, it's.
Hey Danielle, did you get that, our meeting?
You're gonna give it back. Rolf, Joe passed it back to
He
you.
gave it
Did
to
you
you,
get that?
give
We're
it
gonna
to
do a
Ralph.
meeting here, hopefully on the 22nd.
Okay, so the budget meeting is now scheduled for the 22nd, at 7 o'clock here.
That's a Tuesday.
Monday.
That's a Monday.
That's indefinite?
And selectmen are having 2 weeks or no?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Possibly the 9th, if you wanna reserve the room.
Yeah, that's
All right?
Okay.
And we can go over the minutes from the last meeting,
Yes.
that next meeting?
Yep. We will.
Thanks, Joe, nice job.
There's nothing else? Meeting is adjourned.